Hello, Avatar fans, and welcome to the next episode of the Avatar Online podcast. This is going to be episode 262 of our regular shows, and we are recording this one on August 5th, 2023. This is the official podcast for the fan site, AvatarTheLastAirbenderOnline.com. I'm going to be your main host, Morgan Airspeed Prime. Joining me on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
Excellent. So on today's show, we of course have some news to talk about from the last couple of weeks, but this will be the start of 3 podcasts where we will cover the new Avatar novel, the new Chronicles of the Avatar novel, that is Book 4, Yangchen Book 2, the Legacy of Yangchen has released in the last couple of weeks, and we've had some time to go over it. And in this podcast, we will be reviewing the first third of the book. The first 13 chapters we'll do a discussion on, but also we'll include our general thoughts here. And then we'll do the second third on the next podcast and the final third on the podcast after that. So a lot of material to go through with that. But we will jump into the news first. And I think we have to start off with something that has been 18 years in the making, effectively. It depends on what way you're kind of calculating it. But the Avatar The Last Airbender Book 1 Water soundtrack is finally being released. Now, to be fair, for the last, I'd say, year and a half, 2 years, we've been pretty confident this is going to happen. And I think more recently than that, we've been just waiting for the announcement. But finally, it got announced. It was basically a Comic-Con announcement, because what ended up happening was that the Braving the Elements panel got cancelled. But this was announced during the hour that panel was meant to take place. So I'm pretty sure, I think Jeremy Zuckerman was at Comic-Con, and I don't think he had anything else going on. I'm pretty sure it was meant to be announced at the Braving the Elements podcast panel. Because even Braving the Elements, which hasn't posted anything for a while, did post a little 2-minute thing announcing the soundtrack, so I think there was something planned. So we obviously missed a little bit of a really super hype discussion, but it was still exciting when it happened. It was kind of a little unfortunate how it rolled out, where obviously some press releases went out to some of the bigger websites. It just got randomly posted about. Then finally it got picked up on, Jeremy Zuckerman posted about it, Brian posted about it, and we now have a lot of confidence about exactly everything that is happening. But before we get into the details, what were your reactions to finally getting the announcement after all these years? It's finally happening. We're going to get the ATLA soundtrack.
Yeah, no, it was really cool to see it all announced. And I saw it on their specific social media channels before I went to, I guess, sort of the more, mainstream news outlets. So it was pretty cool to see it and to understand, or just to get an idea of what it was and how it was coming out, and, just the different formats that it's coming out as well. I think that was pretty cool that they're going for that. And just the fact that, they feels like they're going to continue it more along the lines as well with everything that they followed up with it. So it's definitely pretty cool to get the announcement. And yeah, like you said, we have, pretty much known that it was pretty much a sure thing coming for the last, 2 years. Although, going back even further than that, it was really, really, sort of up in the air with how long ago it was made and if they had the stuff to even access it properly and stuff like that. So it's cool to see that they, saw the value in it and worth of, actually bringing it to, actual realization after all this time.
Mm-hmm. So the details of this are that it is specifically what's been announced so far, the Book 1 Water soundtrack. So it is going to be a full album. There's 35 tracks on the album. It's coming out November 17th. But right now, one track is available as a single, and that is track 33, Aang Becomes Ocean, formerly known, I guess, by fans as Ocean Spirit. So this is a pretty famous track from the finale of Book 1. They said that pretty much everything here is kind of re-recorded. A lot of these tracks are also expanded upon, basically, as well. So it's an hour 22 minutes of adding everything together on this. So it's a full soundtrack here. It doesn't obviously feel like there's anything missing, but we're going to have to see the whole thing to see what has maybe been included, maybe some of the stuff that hasn't been included. But yeah, it's going to be available digitally. So far it's Apple Music, Spotify, and then the physical release will be vinyl only. But so far we don't actually have any listings for the vinyl. They said like pre-order information coming soon, but it still hasn't kind of come
Yeah.
up yet. So we don't know like if there's anything special going on with the physical release with regards to like will the actual vinyl itself be like fancy colored and have like graphics all over it, like will it come with any sort of almost like kind of collector items like interviews, or is it just more of a kind of standard release? They seem pretty passionate about it, like Jeremy Zuckerman and Brian specifically, that this is what they want specifically on vinyl. Interesting they're skipping CDs, but I guess it is a thing that like vinyls are currently outselling CDs, so I guess it makes sense. Everyone's super excited about this, obviously. Like I said, I think it would have been cool if we maybe had the video of like, I guess, them bringing Jeremy Zuckerman out to properly announce this when it still was exciting the way it happened, but you kind of missed the Comic-Con hype potentially, but still exciting stuff. But what are your thoughts on some of the details we have about the release?
Yeah, I mean, I think, they're going about, pushing out the ways that, are currently, people are interested in. And, the idea of vinyl is, like you said, it's a very sort of, popular thing right now. So I'm sure plenty of fans who haven't considered vinyl for anything, might think of getting it just for this, just, and also just to have it as sort of like a physical thing as well. I mean, the CD would be a lot more convenient, but, I guess, either or, they're all sort of, technology that we currently aren't using as much as we used to. So I guess the older one has a bit more sort of prestige. And I don't know, the fact that they can do a larger sort of case for it, at least that's what I'm assuming, to protect it, means that they could put some extra, goodies in there if they really wanted to, depending on how they distribute it out and everything. They do have the record company or the producer who's producing it, but I haven't seen anything on their sort of specific pages or anything like that. So maybe in the future they'll actually put up, sort of the pre-orders for that or something like that for people who are interested in it. But yeah, no, I think it's pretty cool that's going out there. I mean, I'm interested to see what other places that they also put it on as well, not such as like, YouTube or anything like that. Just to sort of see if there's other places where people can have access to it, since not everyone uses the two that they mentioned. But other than that, it seems pretty cool.
Oh yeah, they did put the single up. Aang Becomes Ocean is up on YouTube. So
Yep.
I guess they will put it up just because that's typically how a lot of this ends up happening. But maybe there might be a slight delay on that. But either way, it's coming out. We have the full track listing. It's interesting one just to go through it. Like we have the ATLA Premier main title. Track 2 is Yip Yip. 3 is Away with Animals. 4 is Banished. 5 is Katara. 6 is Aang the Avatar State. 7 is Into a Nighttime Sky. So you'll notice that like very few of these are the titles that you know from the kind of soundtrack compilations that are already like up on YouTube right now, highlighting that we didn't have official titles for like most of these tracks. 8 is Agni Kai, though probably should be noted it is spelled incorrectly on at least the Apple Music track listing. It's like Angi Kai instead of Agni Kai. 9 is the Kyoshi Warriors. 10 is Just a Simple Monk. 11 is Super Slide. So you can see it's in like order of the series. Super Slide, obviously episode 5. Remember Your Courage. Into Fire Nation Territory, episode 8 here. 14, Roku Destroys the Temple, which was actually, I think, the thing that probably confirmed this the first time is I think Jeremy Zuckerman posted a picture of the like music sheet for Roku Destroys the Temple. 15 is Jet. 16 is Previously On. 17 is Running Away. 18 is Zuko's Scar. 19 A Dream. 20 Blue Spirit Rescue. 21 The Blue Spirit. 22 is Iroh's Sungi Horn. 23 is June Underbelly, but June, if it's meant to be like June, who we'll talk about in the next piece of news, it should have an E on the end of it. 24 Deserter. 25 To the Air Temple. 26 Descendants. 27 the Northern Water Tribe, Yue and Sokka. 28 is Winter, Spring, Summer and Fall. 29 is Commander Zhao. 30 is Ko the Face Stealer. 31 The Spirit World. 32 is Yue Becomes the Moon Spirit. 33 is what we have already, Aang Becomes Ocean. 34 is Aftermath, and 35 is Avatar: The Last Airbender end credits. So a lot of the main stuff that you would expect here. again, we're going to need to hear the whole thing to see like what has been left out potentially, but it seems pretty substantial. I think 35 tracks is definitely something I'm happy with. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on some of the kind of track listings here?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like it's a good amount. Like that's no small order of listening, especially considering what we had for the like previous unreleased, unofficial one that's been passing around the internet for the last, number of years or whatever. So I don't know. It's pretty cool to see them. I mean, some of them seem pretty clear what they actually are. I don't think anyone is really too unclear on what most of them are. It's just going to be interesting how they actually, how we actually get sort of like a official clean version, and especially if some of them are actually, longer than what we previously had. I think that's going to be pretty cool to see, how they actually sound. But yeah, no, I'm definitely pretty curious on hearing, how it actually sounds and everything.
hmm And then yeah, stuff mentioned on like the Instagram. Someone asked like, "Hey, can we get the chorus soundtracks as well?" Brian actually like directly responded saying that like he basically
Mhm.
hopes Korra book 2, 3, and 4 can happen and on vinyl. But he said like, but we're going in kind of like big on Avatar first, which felt like pretty much direct confirmation that like unlike what happened with Korra, where we did the first book and then stopped, that doesn't seem to be the case here. Like it feels like there is a commitment to do all of Avatar, and everything points to this is going to do very well for them. They will move on to Korra then, and that feels like the like what's happening here. So there's kind of finally a bit of confidence surrounding this, which makes sense. Again, the second Avatar Studios got confirmed, it felt like the door was opened to this happening, and they seem to have full support. And I think it will do really, really, really well. So it'll all be just now about, I suppose, the timeline on just because they have to do re-recordings for, I guess, the book 2 stuff, the book 3 stuff. So there will be some gap between releases, but hopefully it's not like crazy far that people forget. But people want the soundtracks for the other books as well. But what are your thoughts on that? Kind of them being pretty confident about the other ones as well.
Confidence is good. I think that's, now that they have this whole studio in place, like you said, it definitely feels like they have, the right backing in order to push this stuff forward. I guess it really, like everything else, is really going to depend on how well it does, how well it's received. I guess, how much the orders are, the plays on Spotify or Apple Music and all those sort of things. I just, hope that compared to before, their metrics are like, I guess, more realistic compared to what they seemed to want before. But no, I think it's definitely a good idea that they're going with that. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense that they're going with the Avatar ones first, because especially since, the movies and everything else that they're putting out is generally based around that. So it makes sense that they would keep sort of the hype and the focus of the fandom around that to sort of begin with, even though, of course, everyone wants, anything that they've done before to sort of push forward. But I think it's really good that at least they're talking about it like this is going to keep going for quite a while.
Then we go into the other Comic Con panel because, of course, like I said, Braving the Elements didn't actually happen because of the writer's strike, writer and actor strikes going on. So all the attention suddenly went to the publishing panel, and as is sort of usual for SDCC specifically, we had very few people covering it. There was one person on Twitter live tweeting from the panel, and even then it felt like we kind of missed out on like quite a lot of what was actually going on like a minute to minute basis. But the main news that seemed to come out of this was pretty much just Dark Horse did announce one new comic, but it wasn't the Korra comic we were all waiting for, the Mako comic. They announced the next Avatar, the Last Airbender comic. So to follow up the one-shot Azula in the Spirit Temple, we are getting Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer, a Iroh and June the Bounty Hunter kind of tag team one-shot here. So this surprised a lot of people in a lot of ways because it's like, what? This is the next one. So we'll talk about this here because otherwise, like officially, kind of like what actually got out there in the news kind of cycle, this was it from the panel. Like even though all the publishers were there, like nothing really came out of this panel apart from this. We'll talk about the other stuff afterwards, but first of all, the Bounty Hunter and the T-Brewer. So summer 2024. What are your thoughts on this as the next one-shot Avatar comic?
Yeah, I think my thoughts on this pretty much fall in line with a lot of other people. It's just it's not something that we necessarily thought was like on the horizon as far as like a tag team duo, considering that, their interactions in the series are, quite limited, and it's not something that you really, at least I didn't put that much stock on, other than, the laughs that they were trying to get with it during the episode. So, it's definitely interesting. I mean, there's, of course, it's Avatar, so they could do, any type of angle of the story that they really wanted to. I know you had some idea, as I've heard before, and I've seen some other people post some other ones. So, there's definitely, a story to be told there for sure. But as far as, something that or at least that I'm interested in continuing on is, in terms of getting more detail of what's happened after the war and everything. This wouldn't be my first, I guess, thought of going towards in terms of, progressing the story forward. I mean, Iroh is cool and he's always an awesome character to have, but I think for him, for the most part, most of us or a lot of people are interested in his sort of past rather than what he's currently doing or his future per se. Not that that wouldn't be interesting, but it's not necessarily we tend to jump to first off. So I don't know. It definitely feels like this is one that they're doing for specific reasons in terms of, the bigger overall broader picture that we're, of course, not quite privy to. But, it's interesting. I'm still going to check it out for sure.
Yeah, the comment kind of surrounding this was that it seems like the direction here is that they want to focus some of these comics on some of the characters who didn't get as much attention in the show. And that's why June kind of has kind of come to the forefront here a little bit. It's weird because I think the Azula comic gave us the impression that after like the first trio of one shots, like we're finally kind of getting back on track where we're still doing character focused stuff, but it's addressing the larger plot points of like Azula post Smoke and Shadow. Like we hadn't come back to that in years. This isn't kind of coming back to them in the sense that I think like Mei, Ty Lee were kind of like, I think, two of the characters people were really hoping to maybe see get the next one. I was thinking maybe Sokka probably deserves one. He probably needs some focus. This is weird because obviously if this was just Iroh and it was an Iroh one shot, people would be excited because I think suddenly the backstory is on the table. But because it's Iroh and June, it kind of feels like they're putting Iroh in the kind of support position for June. Now, there's still the potential to maybe address some of Iroh's past, because what they have to do in this comic is, of course, establish a normal dynamic between these two characters, because I don't think anyone really wants them to continue the whole Bottle of the Water Tribe kind of connection where where the kind of awkward situation between the two of them, that kind of looking back on it is like, it's a little bit creepy. So they have to, I think, immediately get past that and establish like why are these two characters being placed together, because they had an opportunity to put them back together in the finale of ATLA, but they didn't. Like June just guided them to the Order of the White Lotus camp and then left. They didn't even like address that at all. But I'm assuming they'll use that, like the idea that like Nyla knows Iroh's scent, so like she can find Iroh whenever she needs to, which is probably why this is actually going to happen. The question obviously is, why does she need to find Iroh, and what's the specifics there? Now, we of course know he's Order of the White Lotus. He's one of the most kind of wise, knowledgeable characters in the Avatar universe, basically. He probably knows stuff that she needs for her job. It kind of makes sense that, like, okay, they have a previous kind of dynamic together. I don't know. There's potential here, because obviously what they're trying to do with this comic is to flesh June out into a more interesting character, rather than just that character who like appeared twice in the series. And she has one instance of working for the bad guys, one instance of working for the good guys. Where does she kind of fall post-war now, in terms of Is she still remaining a bounty hunter? Are there better opportunities for her now post-war? There's some ideas, but what's some of the speculation that you might have about what potential story is here involving these two, and like why these two get brought together for this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those ideas are pretty interesting, but I think, having her as a character who is more of a bounty hunter who's sort of like up for hire, that in itself is really interesting. And with the world being at a peace now, like, she could be doing a lot of things in terms of like maybe hunting down people who are still rogue, or, using, some connection to getting her sort of, history sort of figured out, and sort of what she's, what brought her to the point where she's, this bounty hunter with this creature that's, pretty unique as far as we know in the world, and how that sort of plays in the larger scheme of things. And, like you said, with, Iroh just being generally knowledgeable and wisdom, like, Iroh's handy on any sort of adventure. So, getting him together with her in terms of, going on some sort of quest, essentially, doesn't seem too far out of the realm of possibility. Now, is this going to be based in sort of, the Earth Kingdom, because that's where, Iroh's currently at, or is this, going to be a reason for him to actually leave that area and go somewhere else, which, might be interesting in its own. Maybe this is, a way for Iroh to sort of reconnect with the world at large, even though he, tends to seem to want to sort of stand away from things from time to time. Although we have seen him in other comics, in sort of world affairs. So I don't know, how that's going to play into it, but there's definitely, like I said, there's definitely potential for, his character to sort of interact, for them to interact in sort of meaningful ways. And especially if, this is going to be some sort of lead in towards what they're going to be doing with the studio and, the larger projects, then, not that everyone will be aware of this comic and how it feeds into things, but at least it'll give, them some sort of backing if they do try to use your character in a larger, media outlet.
Mm-hmm. I suppose the information with June that's kind of maybe important to get out there to more people is the old Nickelodeon website information about June, which people might not be super familiar with, because that website doesn't really exist anymore. But it's up on Tumblr, the lost lore of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And in the June entry, it mentions that her father was also a bounty hunter, and her father was the person who gave Nyla to her. So that speaks to, like, okay, family history in bounty hunting. That's why she went off in this direction. She's known Nyla for many, many years. They kind of grew up together. So that's kind of interesting. She has bounty hunting in her past, of course. The tattoo on her shoulder is in focus once again, and especially post Kyoshi, everyone's kind of being like, Daofei connection, is that going to be maybe a little bit of a kind of part of what's going on here? But that also kind of opens up a bit of a connection between, like, what if Iroh knew her father? That would be an interesting connection to go for. What if she's trying to find her father? They showed off a piece of concept art for a location called Daxia Harbor. Now, we've never heard of this place before, but it looks like a pretty cool harbor. And there's kind of like a town kind of built into the mountainside. So that seems to be where they're going in this, but we don't really know what the actual details necessarily are about that. But, it's an interesting one. The only other thing I'd say is just the early release date here being summer 2024 seems quite far off into the future, considering what the usual schedule for these comics is, which is usually that when we have like a trilogy of books by the same creative team, it's usually like 4 to 6 months after the first book that the new one comes out. And especially given that Azula's been delayed, not because of like creative team issues, more the other stuff, it seems especially weird that there is like more like 9 months between books here. So there's going to be, even though Azula's coming out like end of October, early November at this point, this is still really far afterwards. And it means that it's going to be potentially like the only Avatar book in 2024. Now, there's a chance, of course, we finally get the Korra comic announced and it's the late 2024 book, but just any sign of the comics kind of getting back onto a more normal schedule doesn't seem to be happening here. So I don't really know what the deal here is in terms of, like, is this not a trilogy of books and they really are just doing them full on like one by one now. So the usual gap we get while they plan the next thing is now happening in between every book. Do you have any thoughts on the release date and the schedule, the organization from Dark Horse here?
Yeah, that's always a topic of concern. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, the way that they've been going recently with the comics and everything, it feels like they're sort of a side note in terms of, just having some sort of content out there before they actually get, with the actual sort of, media, movie, TV, those sort of productions here. And, it feels like, as we've discussed before, they're just sort of a bit hamstrung with in terms of the stories that they can get out. So there's, sort of just spacing them out, which, I guess is what they have to do if they're trying to get them out. But it doesn't feel like they're as connected, like you're saying, as they were before. They are just sort of single issue series, which isn't sort of like the worst thing that they could do or anything like that. Like we're still getting, some form of content out there. But I think it would be handy if they would just say that these are just, single, graphic novels about, various different topics. They don't have to necessarily be a series together, although that would be cool.
Mm. Yeah, it's one of those things where like this would be perfectly fine if it was one of like three books we knew we were getting in like 2024, but the fact that this will likely be the only ATLA comic, maybe a free comic book day book, but like they can be very hit and miss themselves. And that's kind of been the problem. When we've had years when we've had like, you know, two parts of an Avatar comic, one part of a Korra comic, and like a collection, the idea that we're down to just this as the only Avatar one in like the year before Avatar Studios properly starts, it's weird, and definitely any sense of like things improving under Avatar Studios feel like, nothing has really changed in that regard. And I think people really have lost a lot of hope and kind of respect for Dark Horse because of whatever happened with the Korra comic and the lack of an announcement there. Because the coverage of the panel ended. There had been no big news about Korra comics. The person like live tweeting was asked directly, and they said like, yeah, one of the like video kind of conference in things mentioned the Korra comic, but from what they were aware of, there was no news. So the Korra comic got like alluded to at the very least at the panel, but it seems like there was no news whatsoever. And then because there was no kind of like public official acknowledgement of the Korra comic, it very much came across as they just didn't mention this thing. And like, why don't we have an update? Like, this was the Korra comic trilogy was mentioned at both Comic Cons last year, SDCC and NYCC. And specifically at NYCC last year, they mentioned it being a Mako comic. So why don't we get an update like a year on, like 9 months on? It was really confusing because this was meant to be a late 2023 release, was what they said, that it would hit 2023, but obviously now with the Avatar comic announcement, that is not the case. So, even just mentioning that it's been delayed would have been nice, but they didn't do that. And so this caused a lot of frustration. People were annoyed more than anything in the aftermath of this, that we got the announcement of a comic we're like, okay, we'll read it. We're sort of excited for it, but it's not really what we're looking for. And then the one we were finally waiting for, we didn't get. So I don't know, a weird one. But what were your thoughts on that? The lack of acknowledgement of the Korra comics at the panel?
Yeah, that does feel really sort of weird how they're going about that, considering they have been, as far as we can tell, pretty adamant that that's been a thing. Even when I think there was like a time where we was like, was this like denied or something? And then they like brought it back, or someone from their actual company was actually saying no, it's still in progress. So the fact that it's almost not mentioned and it seems to be regulated to sort of like a footnote on the side doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence on it. And of course, it's not as big as sort of the Avatar in terms of, fandom and what people are looking for, but it is, a significant portion and people, are looking forward to it. And the fact that it is, a trilogy as opposed to these other ones that are sort of, one-shot-ish stories, it feels like that one, has more or could potentially have more weight to it. So to see it not even get sort of a real mention is disheartening for people who were really looking into that. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they're trying to hold on to it for, NYCC. But I don't know. That definitely feels like it's a a long time to go without saying anything about it.
Mm. And the reason it's so frustrating is because like there's not really been many Korra comics in the last few years. Patterns in Time, if you kind of take that away because it's like a short story collection, which was kind of disappointing. That's been the general opinion from most people. The last mainline Korra comic, Ruins of the Empire Part 3, was like February 2020. So we're over 3.5 years since the last time we had a proper like 72 page comic. This is another part of like why it feels very disorganized. Like how can you do that for like the other side of your franchise? Now you alluded to some of the other stuff that happened kind of like after the panel there on like social media. Yes, someone got in touch with Dark Horse on I think Instagram and was messaging them about it like, hey, this comic that you announced at the Comic Cons last year, does it still exist? And their answer was just like, no, it was just a rumor that there was a Mako comic within Patterns in Time. And the guy was like, I didn't mention Patterns in Time. I'm talking about it like a new comic that you like talked about, which is a whole other story because of course there's the whole idea that like Mako was mentioned on the back of Patterns in Time, but he's not even in any of the stories in Patterns in Time. So there's a bit of like weirdness there, and it's like, how can you say that's a rumor? But this is where like I came in and was just like, okay, I'm just going to post the video because we actually have the full panel from NYCC on video, and I just got the clip where the Dark Horse like was a vice president of marketing literally says, all I can say right now is that the first Korra comic will be about Mako, and they posted that, and that finally forced them to be like, oh, that yeah, it still exists, it's still being worked on. We can't really say much right now. The standard response, I guess, about an unannounced book, and it's like, okay, fine, but it's like, if you can't say anything, like, just say that. Just do the kind of bare minimum of like, we are still working on the Korra comic, and obviously, I mentioned before, it seems like they at some point mentioned the Korra comic, but they didn't make what was said public to everyone, and it didn't seem to hit anyone in the audience that this was anything of note. So there's a communication problem there. Then Alexandria Monique, who is the artist on the Korra comics, actually felt that she had to kind of say something here because, of course, the fandom was annoyed about this. And in one of her responses to someone, she did actually mention that, like, yeah, the Mako comic, it's still in progress and stuff like that, but she alluded to it as if like it was like the Mako story in the comics, as if like wait, so it's not a one shot, it's just a trilogy where like there's a Mako story in it. And it speaks to the idea that we still actually don't have confirmation about is it Korra one shots we're in, or is it actually a full on trilogy? They still haven't said that yet, and so there's like a year plus of confusion that they still haven't addressed properly yet because they haven't talked or anything about that. So just a bit of a mess on the communication department here, where I understand it if your book has been delayed, but like you have to say it's been delayed. Like there's a real problem kind of going on there. But do you have any final thoughts on the non-announcement here for Korra?
Yeah, it is really just a mess at this point, and no, it would be really handy if Dark Horse came out and just said, either it's a thing, it's not a thing, or it's being delayed. I mean, they don't normally seem to have an issue with saying that things are delayed. Like, people will still be upset regardless. So, but, at least then we know that it's not coming for, the next sort of 3 years or anything like that. So the fact that they sort of went back and forth on this, which really just speaks that, just not everyone who, is working on the team for publishing, any sort of book or any sort of media thing knows all the information. Now, you would hope that, the social media team that actually speaks directly with people, in the fandom or just people in general would be, closer-ish up to date. But, again, I guess no one can know everything. But yeah, that really just, doesn't bode well for their just sort of general communications in terms of things. So that's quite unfortunate. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, the way that you sort of describe it there definitely makes it feels like it's part of like a bigger thing. So is it almost sort of like another sort of like patterns and times thing almost, where it's just like a story inside of a story, or is it just individuals? It's just like you said, it's just a lot of confusion of what it really is, which it seems like they're not even at the point yet, despite them saying that it's still a thing, to actually outright have a clear picture on how it's actually going to feed into the bigger state of things in terms of their comics and how they're producing them going forward.
Hmm. And yeah, this doesn't even get into the whole idea of like still nothing on Beasts of the Four Nations, and like anyone like myself who has the other five deluxe sets, like we just have an incomplete collection for like year and a half, 2 years now, with no update on what's going on with that book. So everything is just adding up to like what's going on here, and they get some leeway because of course, like, I think obviously Avatar Studios effectively limits what they can say about a lot of this stuff, but then that brings up, well, do you know who has probably an even worse relationship with the fandom? It's probably Avatar Studios overall, because there is literally no communications, because the official accounts for Avatar just feel like very disconnected from kind of like fandom in terms of like kind of like direct interaction. Whereas at least with Dark Horse, you understand that like Avatar is just like one of the things they do, and they have all these other kind of things that they work on, and because Avatar is just an IP they kind of have, they can't talk as much about that. But you also expect with Avatar Studios in place that there be a little bit more like kind of community management, and they should be the ones actually communicating better about things. But even then, it speaks to like the weirdness about who was the first one to like actually like officially publicly tweet about the new Iroh comic and Iroh and June comic. It was the official Nickelodeon account, which was then retweeted by Dark Horse. So like, what's going on there? Because no one follows Nickelodeon who's like an Avatar fan, basically. Like it's that sort of thing where like, why would we expect them to actually give like in-panel coverage and stuff like? And even then, they only posted like 3 tweets. It's like Azula comic, Iroh comic, and then another mention of the Azula comic. Like that was it. Where are the Avatar Studios accounts, and when are the official accounts going to evolve? Is kind of what we're waiting for here. But yeah, that was a Comic-Con here. Alexandria Monique did roughly mention that like she kind of hopes New York Comic-Con will be like the announcement of the book, but like I often feel like it shouldn't be on the artist or the writer of the comic to have to do this sort of like, calming the fandom down. This should be on Dark Horse or Avatar Studios. So I don't want to hold her to that or anything like that. But it does kind of feel like it's a requirement now that New York Comic Con announces this comic, because otherwise it's just going to get like a random announcement like at some point in between the cons, because it's not going to be delayed so much that it's like even further out than that, because I'm pretty sure this is going to have to be the kind of like October November book for next year, maybe. Could be early 2025, but who knows. But the final piece of news is that we got another Diamond Select Toys Avatar Gallery Diorama figure announced. So this time we get Iroh. So Uncle Iroh, it's kind of like a late book 2 Iroh, kind of running away, fighting the Dai Li type thing. Really nice statue here. Really kind of strong pose here. Iroh doing a big fire punch. He's on some kind of stone kind of base, but then there's fire coming up all around it. I think this is a super nice looking figure overall. I think they did a great job with it and getting like the characterization with the action that he's doing. So these continue to, I think, be definitely the best of the Avatar kind of figurines that we get. And especially for the pretty nice price that these have as well compared to other kind of more expensive stuff. But what are your thoughts on the Gallery Diorama Iroh?
I agree. These ones have always been really nice. I think overall they usually do a pretty good job of capturing the character's likenesses, and this one definitely fits it. Like, this feels like it's straight out of the episode, the pose and everything, and the flame effects around it. I think they did a really good job with this one in terms of making it feel like it's pretty much pulled straight out from the show. So no, this is definitely a good one. And yet the price on these are pretty good if you're into the figures and stuff, assuming the shipping to you isn't too bad. But yeah, this definitely looks like a good one for fan Spyro.
Hmm. So yeah, that one's estimated arrival is Q1, so it's roughly January, February, March 2024. The previous announced one was, of course, TOF. That's more like Q4 this year. So last couple of months of this year, that's expected. And then they usually do these in groups of three. So we probably should be expecting another announcement at some point soon. Again, they did announce months ago they were working on multiple of these at the same time. So I assume they're doing more than just the TOF and the IRO. Big thing obviously is going to be about who is next. So they've done the four benders of Team Avatar, IRO. Who's next? We all obviously want Sokka. Suki would be nice. They seem to be sticking to the benders though for the big effect kind of bases that they can do. Azula is probably the most kind of significant bender they would have to do next, and I think the blue fire or lightning could look really really good. But what are your thoughts on what character they do next for number 6? I think it's.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it definitely feels like Azula would be one, especially if they're banking on sort of like the comic that's coming out recently, which, I don't know how that works in terms of the cycle of, when they're producing these or whatever, but just even if it was like after the fact to sort of bank on it, that would make the most sense to me. But I don't know. I think I really would be interested in seeing them do sort of a non-bender and how that would actually look for it. And maybe they do more of a environment with it if they're not going to do as many sort of, bending effects with it. So that could be pretty interesting, especially, I don't know, with Ty Lee and with Sokka and, all the different items that he has. Like there's some ways that they could make that look pretty cool. So no, I'm definitely curious to see where they go forward with these, especially since these seem to be the best ones from, at least from Diamond Select that I've been seeing.
Yeah, I think for the non-benders, it would be an interesting one to do, like just maybe a cheaper price point if you just can't do a bigger like effect base and stuff like that. Or an interesting idea I saw was like, what if they just do a pretty simple base and have like Sokka and Suki in the same like statue, basically. That way you kind of make up for the fact that you can't do a giant like huge fire effect, but you just have the two characters there. I'm not sure price wise how exactly that would work, but kind of feels like that's the sort of thinking we almost need to have here, because otherwise, like, what are they going to do to make it kind of feel the same? Because if they're charging the same for a Sokka, you expect it to kind of stand out, and how do they do that? It's going to be a tricky one there, but yeah, we're waiting for some more announcements, and especially when like a lot of the other like figure companies like just seem to have stopped, like McFarlane. Hello, are you out there? I don't know what's going on there, because they have the Korra license, but we haven't seen them do anything with. Loyal Subjects, they also are doing Avatar, but I haven't seen anything new from them in a long time. I think some of the more recent rumors for Avatar Funkos are beginning to kind of go up again. So, because of course we had the Boomy come out relatively recently, we're expecting the kind of wave he's associated with to come out at some point soon. But merchandise has been very slow, especially considering like a year or two ago, like we had a lot of merch, but even that's kind of calmed down. So we're building up to stuff again, and kind of like we were discussing with Dark Horse, you kind of wonder, like, is some of the priority going to sort of like the plan for how will publishing, how will merchandise support Avatar Studios once it starts? Like, we have to assume this will finally be the time that Avatar gets a merchandise focus correct to coincide with the show, because of course they went too early with ATLA in the early days. They didn't have anything for Korra when it aired. Will they finally get it right this time is the kind of big question. But do you have any thoughts on that? Just the kind of flow of kind of merch and announcements with kind of where we are in the cycle at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like it's a lull right now in terms of how things are going, especially considering like there was such a time where it just seemed like every person or every sort of company was just able to get the license for Avatar or Core. And now it definitely feels like, sort of the hype around that, from, the sort of announcement of the live action and stuff like that, and all the other news is sort of, brought it more down to earth, which I don't know. It feels like almost like a repeat, like before, where you were saying like, they had, merch and stuff like that, but it was too early. This, even though there was a lot of hype before with everything on Netflix and stuff like that, it still feels like it was too early considering when, the actual studio and the actual shows and movies is actually coming out. So, I mean, it definitely feels like it's just, too much too soon again. But hopefully, maybe with the fact that things are going down now, this is sort of the more sort of coordinated attack of things compared to what's happened before.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that has been the news, and we'll move into our main topic for this podcast, which is our part one of our Legacy of Yangchen discussion. So it's been just over, I suppose, 2 weeks since the book has been released. This is, of course, the second and last Yangchen novel. The panels didn't say anything about the future of Chronicles of the Avatar. The situation there seems to be that FCE is probably highly likely to not be the writer on the fifth Chronicles of the Avatar book, whatever they go about announcing that. We don't really have much of a sense for what it's going to be. There was one interview where FCE said that, like, if he was to ever write again, he would probably do Avatar Zito, but I wouldn't take that to be confirmation or anything like that. The afterword within the book, combined with what he said on Instagram, to me made it very clear that he's stepping back, at least for the time being, from writing the books. So I don't know what that necessarily means, because he held back from just full on being like, I'm done for now with the comics. He didn't quite say that, but it was very different than I think other times after a book has been released. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, based on what FCE has said, like, do you think he's just done for now? We won't see him write again? Where do you think it is?
Oh, it definitely feels like a more along the lines of, taking a pause, especially when you do read sort of the stuff in the book. It definitely feels like, this has been like a significant part of his career and his journey in order to do these books, and sort of, the attention and stuff that's come out of it. So it does feel like this is almost sort of like, it could potentially be sort of a send-off sort of type of situation here. But like you said, the door is sort of semi-still open, but we really don't know, what's going to happen going forward. I definitely do hope that they continue this overall going forward, which it feels like they are. It feels like, there's enough, buzz around it, enough for them to see the value in it, and this sort of, medium of storytelling. But as far as FCE being here to continue with it, not entirely sure. I don't know. I think it would be cool, but, creators do want to do other things with their time and stuff like that, and this definitely does take significant effort to sort of push forward.
Yeah, definitely. We need to see these novels continue. They've been very important to the fandom the last couple of years. I've said, I think, for a while now that, like, I think we probably do need a new writer just to kind of highlight that other people can write novels, so we're not just locked into expecting him to be the writer forever. So somewhat early on in the series, switching writers, I think, is probably the right thing to do, just to get a different voice for different avatars. Because, each writer has traits that they're kind of associated with, and if you get too many books by the same author in a row, you could begin to see some similarities, and, we that's what we're looking for, just a variety as we go forward. But let's get into talking about Legacy of Yangchen here, the second of two novels here. The way we're going to do this is we'll do some general thoughts up front here, and then we'll be going through the first third of the book, basically chapter by chapter. We're not going to spend like a ton of time on every single chapter. We're going to get through the material, but we'll focus on specific spots when we need to. So, in terms of general thoughts, my thoughts on the book are that, once again, it is a very, very strong, high-quality Avatar novel. I think it is 4 out of 4 for the novels in terms of them all being very, very good. I think what really stands out to me in Legacy is the characterization of Yangchen, Kavik, and the Yangchen-Kavik, relationship over the course of the book is really, really well done. That is the standout, super well done thing throughout the entire book. A lot of the other characters, I think, do get some chances to shine as well. The only maybe negative on the character front is that I think I wanted more Chai Si. I think I wanted a little bit more Kalyan. And the core criticism I would probably have coming out of it is similar to Shadow of Kyoshi. Like, these books ending is always a little bit of a weird situation. Is I was not super happy with some of the details surrounding, like, the mystery reveals about kind of combustion bending, Project Unanimity, like how it all kind of came together. I felt that they leaned on the side of giving too little information, to the point where I think it comes across very vague and kind of non-committal. We'll get into talking about that as we go through the book, but that's kind of my main takeaway here. Is character writing is great, some of the reveal details not as great, and the endings of these duologies is weird because it's the end of the story, but the era is wide open to continue, but they end it here. And especially with the situation we were dealing with here, I kind of felt we needed a bit of an epilogue to deal with the whole, like, and so where did the Shang cities go in the aftermath of this book? You know, what is the legacy of Yangchen? I understand with the Kyoshi books to a certain degree why they didn't, like, skip ahead to 200-year-old Kyoshi and show us something like that, but it is also the case that since the Kyoshi books came to an end, we haven't really got any new Kyoshi content, and it's probably going to be the same case with Yangchen, whereas there's still stuff I would like to come back to. So, a bit of a kind of frustrating situation, but again, the quality of the novels I think is still very, very high. They're far and away the most in-depth material we get every year. But Greg, what are your overall thoughts on the legacy of Yangchen?
Yeah, no, I think overall for me, these definitely sort of, stand together as being very sort of strong books if you're sort of interested in sort of the world and sort of the scene behind the scenes in terms of what's going on in the Avatar world and how things sort of work in sort of, I guess, sort of the underbelly or sort of, direct sort of, political machinations between the different sort of heads of state. So I think if you're sort of interested in those sort of topics and how they play out in the Avatar world, which I know for everyone isn't sort of their cup of tea, but I think if you are interested in that and sort of how, the various characters in this story sort of are interacting and playing off this and sort of understanding their sort of internal sort of, I guess you could say, motivations and sort of what makes up their sort of key things and how that plays out in sort of the larger schemes of things throughout the whole Avatar world. I think this does a good job of sort of, bringing those towards the forefront and, showing how, your decisions can have, real world implications, even if you're sort of not sort of the person who, is, I guess sort of could say like directly responsible for things. All of their actions in the story have some, meaningful action, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them you don't even quite expect for them to have. So I think, the story does a good job of playing those out. I think they're, like you said, it's not sort of a perfect story. There definitely are things that people have sort of criticized on it. And, some of them are depending on sort of your flavor in terms of stories, in terms of if you're one who wants more action or more sort of story beats and, wants things more sort of, I guess you could say sort of clear cut and drawn out. Because I think, for people who do want sort of your hard-coded sort of answers towards, some of the things that we've been, wondering about in the Avatar world forever and ever. This story doesn't necessarily, like you indicated, give you all of those answers in a straightforward sort of method. But it does give you sort of the insight that if you're, I guess if you understand Avatar or you follow along with it, you can sort of, piece together how things might sort of come about in this sort of world, especially, just with the sort of first chapter, now that we sort of have the hindsight information of how things work towards the end of the book, how that plays into the grand scheme of things. So I think if you're, can like that sort of, I guess, intrigue without needing to necessarily know all the answers, this book can, additionally work for you really well. But it definitely does, can end on sort of the note of, there's more story to come, right? So I mean, I think the whole point of all of the Avatar is that there's always more stories to come, and there's never quite a bit sort of like a best sort of resolution sort of ending, because I definitely was intrigued to see what might happen with these cities, especially the way that they sort of lay everything on Yangchen, and I guess by association Kavik as well. So there's definitely a lot there that has the potential to explore, but I don't know. I think they leave it on a note that's pretty sort of upbeat and positive for the most part. Not everything's perfect at the end of the story, of course, but they leave it on enough of an upswing that you can see that there's some potential for things to work out. And since we do technically know what happens later on, through other avatars, we can see that things do eventually get resolved. It's just sort of how that happens, we just don't quite know, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think this is where like these books could definitely be helped with the rest of publishing sort of assisting them. Like if the comics were able to do one-shots about the other era characters, that opens the door to doing so much. Like I think especially like a lot of people coming out of this book are kind of like Jujinta one-shot to go into that backstory that we really didn't go into. Similarly, like say even with the Kyoshi novels, just like, hey, Rangi focused story to get like a little bit more on Rangi or like Lao Ge, these type of characters. Why not? Like instead of the maybe kind of like it could be good, could be like maybe not so great, like Iroh June combination, like give us the focus on a notable Kyoshi era character, Yangchen era character. It's just the sense of because of the way content works, these books kind of feel final for the era until they announce whatever they're planning to do. You like to have the confidence to know that there will be further exploration. But we'll move into discussing the book sort of chapter by chapter at this point. So the first chapter is Depths. Now, we've had this one for a while. This is the preview chapter for the book. It is a very interesting chapter within the book because it is a full-on Chai-Si backstory chapter. We get her entire kind of youth, how she rose to become a Zongdu, with a few teases of like thematic connections into kind of other stuff later on in the book with the whole diving pressure aspect going on here. But the big thing that it does from a character perspective is it shows you the event in her life that sort of transformed her into the kind of brutal leader of Jonduri that she is, where this is why she's so focused on kind of information gathering, why she's creating unanimity, so that what happened to her in her childhood can never happen to her or her family ever again. And that's a big kind of point being made here, is it's just the kind of the unchecked power that she faces when she's young from the Fire Nation and the Earth Kingdom, the Fire Lord and the Earth King. She wants to have that same power and to counter it. That's well developed, in my opinion, in this first chapter. But what are your thoughts on the opening chapter of the book?
Yeah, I think it does a really good job of that. I think, when she explains her whole sort of backstory and her upbringing, and, like the title of the chapter literally says, the depths that she had to go through, her people, originally had to go through in order to sort of survive in the world. I think it does a really good job of explaining that sort of struggle, and how, even when they were doing their best and had their perfect sort of niche, they still, she realized that the power that they had, it was sort of, misplaced, and it really wasn't power, because there was always essentially, someone stronger that could, command you to do something that you didn't want to do. And, she saw, her whole sort of way of life sort of literally go up in flames. And now that's definitely something that she's reflected and has, hardened her to the point where she's, pretty much the most ruthless sort of, Zongdu that we see, while still, attempting to keep sort of like a nice face on the surface, between these different cities that are, currently sort of managing this sort of situation with the Platinum Fair and everything like that. So, I think it was a great sort of opportunity for us to sort of understand, where her character is coming from. Now, fortunately, this is sort of like the main thing that we sort of see with her throughout, most of the book, if not all of it. But it does do a really good job of sort of explaining that, sort of getting it across, and also just her general thought practice. Like I thought it was, really cool how, she was explaining, sort of what she was thinking about while, she had the attendant that was there while her baby sort of was, unfortunately making noise, but how that was really sort of like her real sort of like driving force, her driving purpose for, doing everything. Her whole idea of, creating her own sort of legacy that can be sort of gone out through, potential future generations, and how that was sort of her main sort of ploy here. So I like that sort of aspect that they're sort of, really coming forward. They did mention a lot of that in the previous book, but now we have, a clear idea of her purpose and how she really, means to achieve it, even though, like she notes that it was unfortunately sort of messed up by, another Zhongdu that she was, sort of working with. But I think that was definitely sort of interesting to note that here, and how she also, works when we find out later on how she works with the other Zhongdu in terms of getting the means that she wants, even though technically those people are at the same, level of status and power.
Hmm. Yeah, the thing with this chapter is like it's really good, but like you say, it's the only like detailed Chicey like backstory perspective chapter in the book. There's only one other one that's from her perspective, but that one is a very small chapter with Chicey and Thoppa that is mainly there to reveal brainwashing kind of things rather than like Chicey's perspective. Um, and then later on in the book, it does things do feel a little rushed in the final third, and like I don't think you quite get enough of Chicey. But from the detail, kind of my disappointment with the details perspective, it feels like there is literally a missing Chicey kind of backstory chapter that is clearly meant to kind of latch on to some of the elements of this chapter, to just bridge the gap between, okay, that's who you grew up, that's what the people on your unknown island did to survive. How did this help you to realize that you can create combustion benders in this way? Because in like the third paragraph of the book, Chicey's people ignored the prevailing wisdom. Without the aid of waterbending, they trained their bodies to accept the pressure, their minds to embrace the signals that they were dying. Dive after dive, they forced their way further into the depths and scraped their hands raw against the slimy spikes of the reef. And they talk about how people died, it was often fatal, but the idea training to accept the pressure is effectively like the reveal of some of the combustion bending training that we get later on in the book. But they never quite establish, like, why did they put firebenders in the water? How did they know to do that? How did they know that a power can come from a firebender going through something like that? And I think because combustion bending is the gimmick in a way of these books when it comes to like its reveals, they're trying to make it out that this is what we're doing in this book, is establishing the first time combustion benders play a role in the world. It ends up kind of feeling a little bit kind of plot hole-esque that we don't come back around to that and don't quite explain why they did this. So that would be the only problem that I kind of really have here. Otherwise, like, I do think this first chapter has some great things. Like, even when you read the book and then come back to it, you realize that, oh yeah, the letter she gets here is the letter from Thoppa, which we'll only learn about in, like, say, chapter 9 or something like that. That's really nice. Even the reveal here, like, it's the only time we actually get to see her son in the book, but that, oh, she's given birth, she has a son, this is fantastic, like she has her kind of like legacy here in front of her, and that this ends up being the thing that she's always wanted to kind of continue on her legacy, but it ends up kind of being what kind of her downfall kind of ends up being kind of caused by is like, now that she has something to protect, there's the kind of fear of protecting it, which is an interesting kind of perspective more towards the end of the book, of course. But it definitely gets across a lot of what kind of Chicey is about. The whole idea of like her always striving to be the last person standing is what the book says, and I think that kind of fits her kind of perfectly. That's why she sets up everything in the way that she does, and that's what she's hoping to do, regaining control of Project Unanimity. So strong opening kind of chapter to the book, but probably needed a little bit more kind of follow-up overall. We'll move into chapter 2 then. This is called Adoration. So some really good stuff with this one as well. So we start off with Yang Chen basically having a nightmare about Jetson, and really getting across how much she blames herself for Jetson's death. The idea that like Yang Chen feels she is responsible for like taking Jetson's spirit from her body, and that is why Jetson has died, and this is a guilt that remains throughout the entire book until like basically right at the end, of course, because they do a nice job of like bookmarking the first attempt to get Jetson and the second attempt at the end of the book. So good stuff. But for the most part, this is the chapter that kind of bridges the gap between the first book and establishing where we are in this book. So we get across that Yang Chen is effectively the acting Zhongdu of Bin She's obviously going to like refuse to fully claim the title, but she is going to be attending the convocation in Taku later on in the book as effectively the Zhongdu of Bin And we again see what she has to do to kind of keep the place going. Things have greatly improved. The city is now known as being a place of like good business effectively, but it is growing at kind of too fast of a rate. She's almost too successful that she can't kind of keep up with it. They need wells, but they don't have the money for these wells, and even though she's got the other Shangs kind of working for her, including two of the most kind of frustrating characters from the first book, there's now an inspector here to kind of judge what's going on and report back to King Feishan. So there's a whole sense of, Yang Chen is hiding a lot of stuff here from the Earth King. She's hiding a lot of stuff from the people about why this is all happening. So she's keeping up all these different acts, putting in a lot of effort to make things better. And it is working, but it all kind of adds up to the whole idea of she comes out to kind of, there's a whole crowd outside, she interacts with the people, but she feels like a fraud in front of the people because she can never tell them what specifically she has done to make things a success. That would they still feel the same if she told them what she did to make them kind of care about her, basically. And that's the kind of a real problem here. She can't take this praise because she feels it's kind of unearned, even though everyone around her is like, but you're incredible. Like there's a level of devotion around you that is greater than any avatar like I've ever seen, even Avatar Zito. So just the sense of like the way the chapter ends, she feels kind of trapped in this weird situation in the town, and this is kind of telling of her like approach throughout the entire book of like she's doing everything as best as she can, but the spy master aspect of like what she needs to do to accomplish it, not everyone agrees with. Even she acknowledges that it's like it's not the most balanced way to do things. But what are your thoughts on this chapter?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. It's really telling of her character and how, her success has really led her, like you said, to being trapped in this position where, she has to play off things, has to smile, has to sort of, go along with things, has to sort of, basically like sort of cajole and sort of blackmail and just, get people to sort of work with her, even though, on the surface of everything, it really, she's really, or, the view of the people is that she's really sort of, magnanimous, that she's, able to sort of get these, people who would not normally have any sort of care for, people's well-being to, sort of do these sort of things. Even the whole way that she has to go about, getting the other Shangs to sort of, lay down their wares in order to get more, wells in the city before the city sort of, starts getting sick because there's too many people and they're expanding at too much of a rate. Even she, herself, isn't, like you said, she's not happy with the way that she has to go about doing this. Like it, by all sort of appearances, especially to the Inspector from the Earth Kingdom there, it looks like, they're really sort of, playing into her hand, into sort of her vision of a better city. But, like you said before, like these people that were, really hard to work with in the last book, now seem like they're sort of, almost working with her out of the goodness of her heart. But, her whole idea of like sort of giving away her sort of staff as sort of a avatar, sort of heirloom in order to sort of increase the funds here is just, it's such a way that, even her and sort of like her best lives, necessarily aren't sort of like happy, or she thinks that they wouldn't be happy about the way that she's going about this. And like you said, the people there, like they mentioned like how Boma reacts to her sort of giving away her staff here, and how that's such like a huge thing to happen, even though the inspector tries to say that she probably will get back. And by the end of the book we do know how she does get it returned, but at this moment in time it definitely seems like this is sort of like a shocking thing. And she's almost sort of feels like she's shocking herself at this point with what she has to do, that she really just can't sort of believe it in this sort of situation. And this sort of slope that she's on just sort of continues on for pretty much most of the whole book. And even the final resolution of things is still sort of held on sort of tenuously, depending on who can find out certain things by the end of whatever sort of situation could accomplish. So it's definitely a interesting situation that she puts herself in here for the betterment of other people. And it's interesting just to see how our perspective of her character has changed between just these two different books, which all of these books have changed our perspective on all these avatars, which I think is a really cool thing. It's something that we probably wouldn't have been able to sort of realize in any sort of other I guess sort of method of medium, considering how things have to be produced for content in general.
Yeah, because that's the thing with Yang Chen and I suppose Zito as well. It's like they're initially presented like the legend of the characters, that they're like master diplomats who kind of just brought peace to the world, but like actually getting to see, I think they use this kind of phrasing later on in the book, like kind of like how the meat is like butchered, how it actually goes down is very different. And a lot of people have this view of like Zito now, that he was the master diplomat, but there's all these little mentions, especially in the first book, of like how his life was actually messy. He was also basically a spy master as well. That there was always this kind of hidden side of things, because I think probably the most telling thing of all is Yang Chen hates the way she has to sort of frame everything. She can't just say that like we need to improve things in the city to help the people. She also has to add in, because if people get sick, revenue streams will stop. And the inspector will only be happy if she adds on that last bit, because it is ultimately all about money and what they earn. And that's kind of what the people kind of like amount to. Which is interesting, given Zhongdu Iwashi later on in the book, that's kind of his like entire philosophy, is just like money and how it relates to like what that amount of money is worth in terms of like human life and resources and so on. So it starts a little bit of the kind of Yang Chen arc about like her view on kind of humanity, effectively, that like she's trying her best, but humans, that like everyone else is not helping her effectively, and it's really growing into a major problem. And you also see even early on the idea of like her not having someone like Kavik around on a day-to-day basis is kind of also kind of help, not great. She needs someone like Kavik to kind of bounce off to help keep herself sane to a certain degree. And we see the improvement immediately in the early chapters, which is kind of a fun thing as well. So yeah, the key point, as you mentioned there, is that yes, she does have to give away her staff. Remember this, because it comes into play in a couple of kind of instant. One regards to she doesn't have it here to help her, and then in a secondary point, it's like this is where it ended up. So there's a whole arc for the staff as well. But this brings us then into chapter 3, which is Among Friends. And this is a fantastic chapter, because it's the only chapter in the book where we get a scene with High Chieftain Oyaluk of the Northern Water Tribe. He's the chief of both tribes. So this is obviously one of the people who was heavily involved. What we were told in the first book, he and the Fire Lord effectively caused the Platinum Affair to happen in the first place. Their actions caused the Feishan to counter them, and this created the whole situation. So we're finally going to get some perspective on that here, but also Yang Chen is of course come to visit him in the Northern Water Tribe, because she's here for other reasons we will get to in the next chapter. But the discussion here is very interesting. It is, of course, starts off with just the standard stuff. They go through the meal. There's a performance from the Sifu, who is Sifu Akawak, who's actually quite young, it's described here. there's a fun little moment where Yangchen plays along with the performance, which is kind of nice to see. But Oyaluk wants to discuss things immediately, but Yangchen is just like, no, only when we are like completely alone, everything's been cleared away, no spies whatsoever. But even when they are alone, she still creates like an air tornado for them to stand in, so that absolutely no one can hear what they're talking about. So it's a really, really interesting situation. But finally, they do get down to business. There's a nice kind of reflection, I suppose, kind of the passage of time here, where Oyaluk is like, I remember you used to be super young and kind of play with my nieces and nephews, but now you are here as like a fully fledged avatar negotiating business, peace treaty type stuff. But he wishes that she was fairer, not another Zito, because of course Zito is basically accused of favoring the Fire Nation, and he is now accusing her of favoring the Earth Kingdom because she's basically the Zongdu of Bin and quote unquote works for Fei Shan. And of course her counter is that like, whoa, don't involve me in this. Like, you and the Fire Lord caused the Platinum Affair. I'm just kind of trying to pick up the pieces here, basically. And we effectively, when we get into the details of this, find out that Oyaluk never specifically sought out to cause the Platinum Affair. It was kind of just advice he was given by his advisors that he just went along with. It is described here, and it comes back. Over a game of Paisho, his most senior advisors told him that the Fire Lord is probably leaning in the same way, but that we should side with General Nong over Fei Shan in this incident, and it obviously went very, very wrong. And they allude to it immediately that this is the Order of the White Lotus meddling in world affairs, to the point where it's like basically the Order of the White Lotus caused the Platinum Affair deep down. Yes, the world leaders signed off on it, but it was actually the Order of the White Lotus members who actually caused this. So I do actually take a break in this one because I think this is a kind of important chapter. What are your thoughts on the kind of chapter up to this point, and I suppose getting to meet Oyaluk for the first time here?
Yeah, I think meeting him in this sort of situation it works, is perfectly what we've seen before in terms of meeting the leader of the Water Tribe, sort of nation, Northern Water Tribe nation. So I like that sort of, I guess you could say, consistency with what we've seen before. So it does a really good job of letting you sort of visualize this before you really get into sort of the meat of things and understanding sort of the origins and the beginning of the Platinum Affair. And yes, it's interesting to have that sort of hindsight perspective now, knowing that this was really sort of the sort of underworkings of the White Lotus sort of pushing things forward. And when you have some sort of hindsight, I guess from their perspective, it seems like that would have been like a good thing to go with, but obviously it didn't quite sort of work out the way that they wanted to, and clearly there should have been, I guess, sort of more, sort of effort or more prerogative or more intelligence gathered on the specific world leaders that were in this sort of affair or eventual affair, in order for this to sort of have sort of the desired result that they wanted to have rather than where they're currently at. But I think it is, it's interesting. I like the idea that they're showing the sort of familiarity that Yangchen has with the Oyalak here, and how, things were in the past were sort of different, and how, Yangchen, is sort of at least currently shaping up to be more along the lines of the previous Avatar, which, some of the people around still sort of remember his sort of Zito's sort of reign and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see how some, avatars can be completely different than the previous one, and some sort of fall, more in line with the previous one, depending on the current sort of state affairs of the world.
Mm-hmm. And after this, we get into the idea of like what Yangchen is here for, to meet with him about, is she wants him to basically reach the hand out and try to end the Platinum Affair. Like at the next convocation in Taku, which is a meeting of all of the Zongdus, but also all of the world leaders as well. So it's like the only time every year where they really discuss like the terms of the Platinum Affair. This is their one chance to really try and make a big change here. And so the idea is that she has already kind of tried with the Fire Lord to make this same kind of plea. Now she's doing it with Oyaluk here. She wants him to make an effort to try and bring the Platinum Affair to the end. Like, return the world to normal is a direct quote here. And her point is basically this, and I actually really like this quote. She says, we don't have to leave our mistakes uncorrected. We don't have to accept the ills of the world simply because they've lasted. Give me your support, and together we'll make it so that the four nations no longer have to hate and fear each other. That just because things kind of work right now doesn't mean they have to stay this way forever. We want this to end, because it does mean that three of the nations kind of hate each other overall, and there are still issues, even if the Shang cities are kind of working, but it shouldn't have to be this way. Kind of core idea overall. But Oiluk is like, no, it's not going to work. Fei Shan will never agree to it. Yangchen thinks it will work because her view of Fei Shan is that he's happier about this whole thing. But Oiluk turns things around and is kind of making the point that, like, my advisors tell me that Fei Shan's been agitated and is basically like deploying forces, preparing for some sort of a conflict. He believes the Fire Lord and I are responsible for the destruction in Bin as if we deployed some kind of weapon against him. So this is a huge reveal, because it's like, how does he suddenly now know for sure that it wasn't the spirits in Bin that it was actually like a weapon of some sort being used? And this is a kind of major kind of reveal that kind of happens here. But what are your thoughts on this? The attempt here to convince the world leader to end the Platinum?
Yeah, I mean, Yang Chen's heart is in the right place in all of these sort of situations that she's usually put in. Most of the time, she's right. In this case here, I mean, it definitely feels like the idea of these cities, while, it did create some measure of stability between the three nations here that was, clearly needed at that point in time with, sort of the back end dealings that were going between these different nations. It feels like, at least from her perspective, that there really are, positives. Like he mentions earlier that, her being essentially like Zito because she's, making money for the Earth King essentially here. So, her perspective is that things are on sort of the upswing here. But clearly Fei Shan, in his sort of, paranoid sort of sense that he seems to always have, which is something that I think the book does a pretty good job of, or even from the last book, really just showing that he's very sort of, I guess just not trusting at all of like anything in any sort of situations. Like he has to see it on his own, and especially in like the last couple of chapters when he's literally just sort of walking around. He really does need to sort of see and understand things himself. So clearly, even if he did have that sort of talk with Yangchen, he doesn't trust anything that he can't see. And for someone like him, he probably can't see spirits, or maybe has anyone near him who can see spirits either. So from that sort of perspective, it almost seems like it was inevitable that he would sort of have some sort of contingency in place to sort of, actually get a better read on some things. And it just happens to be that he has, all these forces behind him. And that's sort of, going to be sort of the stopping point here in terms of, really having any sort of agreement. Because if he doesn't trust things are going well, then the others, just by sort of, just having to counter him directly, have to sort of be on the same sort of wavelength to protect their own sort of people and stuff. So it's sort of a hard situation that Yang's being put in here. And, it seems like sometimes even she doesn't have, all the information that she really would like to have, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, the final section of this chapter is really good because there's a bunch of stuff that happens here. She, of course, tries to deflect and like, there's no way it's a weapon. Like, the spirits, like, you couldn't possibly have like messed with the spirits enough to kind of cause this, is effectively the idea. But she's also thinking to herself, the only way extra information could have possibly leaked about this to make him more assured about this is that I told a Unarak, that means the Order of the White Lotus, know they have to have a leak somewhere. They got this information and lost it, is the idea. So second kind of like negative major count for the Order of the White Lotus in this chapter. But as you kind of mentioned there, Oiluk is like, I have to respond. I have to counter this. It's the kind of rational course of action is I have to prepare for this as if it is going to happen. So I can't go for this kind of act of peace in the middle of like a war effectively on the verge of happening. And He just tries to kind of end it in as nice a way as possible, even though it got a little bit heated here. Like he wishes things were different, but they are not. So Yang Chen prepares to leave, and he calls her back last second, and she looks back and sees this kind of very lonely man, kind of like almost afraid to ask this question. And he's like, "My cousin Akudan, is he well?" And she is like, "Yeah, he is. He's good." But then he feels the need to say something more, and he says, "He knows I couldn't get involved. Had our link been discovered, he would have become too valuable a hostage. He would have become leverage. He knows this, right?" And Yang Chen's answer, in relation to what Oyaluk said, "You did the rational thing," and she walks away. And I really like this at the end because it shows you the kind of like other side of this kind of like leader who's, they describe him as being like someone who is a reasonable leader in most regards. He just seems to have made this massive error when it comes to the Platinum Affair. But then also this kind of moment where he obviously chose the rational idea, protecting the nation in a way over his cousin here, Akudan, which confirms a little detail from the first book that like Kavik threw out there when he first met the two of them, the whaler with one arm. So that confirms the connection of Akudan to the northern royalty, and then yeah, the rational thing, and that's kind of Yang Chen's frustration in a lot of these situations, is that not enough people are doing the kind of emotional thing, the care for family thing, which is kind of interesting given that, say, like Kalyan, a lot of his decisions are actually ultimately about family as well. So the chief, of course, of the tribe being the one not to overly care about family is an interesting point. But what are your thoughts on this final section of this chapter?
Yeah, this was, I don't know, it's just sort of a sad sort of ending to their conversation here because, they're basically just trying to do what's best for their own in this sort of situation. And Yang Chen, has the sort of grander picture in mind and is trying to sort of play things off, but, it's not quite working, the situation. This sort of, tension between the nations is still too strong even after all of these years. It's like just like a Cold War that's coming back to the surface now, because of this, what she's trying to cover up as a spiritual event, but it almost seems like it's too big to be sort of that sort of situation, even though they do mention her other previous sort of event and how she's trying to play off of that, in terms of General Old Iron and how that this could be a similar situation. But clearly, I guess maybe because people didn't see enough of whatever it was, that that belief isn't quite there. But yeah, it is, it's sad, the whole idea of family and what takes more prominence over your duties to the world is something that the book plays off of, time and time again, and you see how this can, work towards the benefit for some and work towards the detriment to some as well here. So yeah, it's definitely one of the sort of sad bits of the story and how it gets sort of turned out and how sometimes it can even be used towards your own advantage here if you're willing to go towards extremes with it.
Mm-hmm. The next chapter is the Spirit Oasis. So, of course, this is why she's really here in the Northern Water Tribe. So she heads to the Spirit Oasis. She's going to do some meditation here into the spirit world to try and find Jetson. The difference this time compared to previous attempts to search for Jetson is she actually has something to aim for this time. She knows the fog. She doesn't know it's the fog of lost souls yet, but she knows that there's some sort of a fog-like spirit that she has to kind of aim for as she goes in. It is described that she takes the spirit kind of tea here, so she's in the best possible scenario here to kind of transfer over. She doesn't have a problem with this because she is very, very spiritual. But what's interesting here is right before she transfers over, she kind of has this sort of thought process in the middle of her kind of meditation where she really reflects almost on the idea of, maybe I should have done this first before I had the failed meeting with the world leader, because she has a very negative view on basically the leadership of humanity effectively going into this. And you mentioned Old Iron a second ago. It's that sort of thing of she begins to kind of almost relate more and more to Old Iron's perspective in the Rift incident, of why, like, should humanity be given a chance? They just continuously make the wrong choice for themselves, effectively. And she even notes that something pops into her head. It's one of Shoken's lines. If a child given every comfort won't stop screaming, leave it in the field. And with regards to what she's thinking about, it's like, if humanity won't stop making mistakes, like, abandon it, basically. That's what she thinks about as she heads in. And she actually transfers into the spirit world, like, body and spirit. So this kind of relatively unique situation that we don't see too often. But I think the scenario here, where she is, who she is, I think it makes sense, even if you probably didn't have to do it this way. But I think it kind of fits the idea of, like, she full on was willing to almost, like, give up on kind of things, and she fully transfers over into the spirit world. Um, and from there, we just get this interesting kind of journey, because she arrives effectively in the right spot. It's clear this is the area where the Fog of Lost Souls typically is. The description here matches the few times we've seen the area in, like, Korra and so on. And she is looking around here, trying to find Jetson. She finally encounters some people, but of course she gets the typical thing of, like, they're people from all different eras. There's ancient kind of humans in here. They all are going through so much kind of emotions, as we know from the fog. It kind of makes you relive your kind of past events. And when she finally, I suppose, realizes what's kind of maybe going on here, the fog begins to try and kind of, like, take over her. And it's described that, like, it's even worse that she came in here physically, because, like, the fog is literally trying to, like, go into her body and, like, infect her. And because she's the Avatar, like, she has so many pasts to relive. And in a way, this is kind of what saves her. But she ends kind of blacked out on the ground, being like, save me, like, please save me, as the defense mechanism Avatar state activates. Like, this is how dangerous this situation is. Like, they even make the note that, like, is she going to outdo Jetson here and, like, lose herself physically and spiritually in the spirit world? Like, that's how bad things have kind of gone here. She is not fully at peace within herself to be able to just walk around in the fog. And there's a lot of guilt and a lot else going on here, discussed at the start of the chapter. So I really like this chapter here. And again, we'll bookmark this at the very end of the book, but I like the initial failure, because it doesn't keep the kind of, like, when are we going to deal with Jetson thing for the whole book. Tackling it in the early chapters was a good thing to do. But what are your thoughts on the Spirit Oasis?
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a good point to mention this, that, she knows where this is. She has the ability. She already has sort of the mental understanding of the spiritual world in order to get into it, even if, her past experience with it hasn't been sort of the best sort of mindset. But, she does mention, that she has gone into the spirit world before many of times, and she's usually gone to the more sort of, light, sort of positive sides, where, the animals and the creatures are sort of, all sort of flocking around her and sort of being curious and stuff like that. So, like, she has, a good understanding of it, but that was the whole sort of, like you mentioned, her whole sort of mindset when she was going into this just wasn't the right sort of frame of mind for her to go into this. And, the fact that she went into it, full body and everything like that, which, could be an advantage in some cases, but in this sort of situation, it doesn't quite work out for her sort of advantage in this case here, just because of the situation that she's been in for the past sort of, amount of time here. So it's really sort of jarring. And just the fact that she doesn't know, it seems like she, even though she has an idea of what this is and that, there's some sort of being or creature here, it seems like while she's going through this fog here, she really sort of starts to grasp what it really is, what it entails, and how it's going to affect her. And unfortunately, she doesn't quite realize that entirely right before the end, where she's really sort of, at her lowest point and has to rely on sort of her avatarness and everything else in order to attempt to get herself out of this situation that she's put herself in. So it definitely was a sort of a highlight chapter, just because of, going to a place that we have a good understanding, we have a good visual for it. It sort of all comes to pass here, and we get to see another, spiritual person, or just another person in general, try to navigate this fog of lost souls, and how it seems like whenever you come here, sort of the first time, or at least your initial sort of reaction to this area, just it doesn't go well at all. It's just this a quite a shocking thing for even the most spiritual people to sort of go through, and you really have to have the sort of perfect mindset in order to navigate this.
Next, we have the chapter previously, which covers a lot of ground because this is the first Kavik chapter in the book,
Yes.
but it also gets us to the point where he reunites with Yang Chen, and you in a way think like there's no way that can possibly happen. And arguably you can make the case that maybe they should have split it into two chapters, considering it's like relatively long, but it all flows together pretty nicely. So the first section is just showing a little bit of a kind of Order of the White Lotus training session. He's getting some waterbending training from a Unarak. Specifically, it's this very subtle waterbending, the idea of taking water out of laundry in this case, but with the most minimal movements possible, without disturbing it, without anyone, like alerting anyone to the fact that you are doing it. It's kind of like spy waterbending effectively here. How do you use waterbending, make things wet, and then reverse things perfectly so that no one knows it was kind of wet in the first place? And it's described here that the earthbenders have to do the same thing, how to repack dirt properly after you bend, and how do firebenders especially like hide stuff that you've burned or kind of counter those sort of ideas. So he's going through all the kind of basics here about how to be a better operative, and we get some cool kind of things here of like a Unarak's kind of like 3 tricks of the trade effectively. The first one is like hit first before the enemy even marks you as an enemy. The second lesson is bend what your opponent is bending when you have no other choice. And then the third one is move your surroundings with your element when you don't have enough of your element. So Kavik puts this into action when another low level kind of White Lotus member, Do, arrives into their safe house here. So he just like ices this guy's like ankles to the stairs, nearly kills the guy going down the stairs. A Unarak uses lesson 2 and 3 to kind of save his life, basically, by like she uses the water Kavik used, creates like a net out of water, grabs the laundry that like Kavik is trying to dry out, and makes like a landing pad for Do. So some cool stuff going on here. I think that's also the first confirmation we had of that a Unarak is a waterbender as well, but we sort of had that sense in the first place. So Do basically just alerts her to some like key information that she's able to then inform Kavik that like, hey, we're going home. I'm taking you home to the Northern Water Tribe. The heat isn't off, but we need to head up here like anyway. So this is the Order of the White Lotus's kind of like plan coming into action here. So what are your thoughts on the this first scene with Kavik?
Yeah, I think this was a good reintroduction for his character, and it's like you get to see that he has been around, he has been doing something, so he hasn't just been like sort of sitting on his hand. He's essentially been getting training in sort of the Order of the White Lotus to become sort of a better operative, to become this sort of I guess sort of enhances already, pretty, significant skill in waterbending. Because I think, the first book did a pretty good job of sort of showing that, he was, already like a above average sort of waterbender. Maybe not as good as his brother Kylon, but, it still was, his potential to be good was already there, or be great was already there. So this is just sort of, making it seem that he can, be even better. And I think, the rest of this chapter does even more to sort of show this here. But yeah, it's interesting to sort of get the sort of ideas and the mentality of the White Lotus. This is something that this book and the last book does a pretty good job of sort of, really fleshing the ideas out of the White Lotus and how, they really operate in this world, which is something that, the show, especially for, who is geared towards, wouldn't really be able to show this sort of, ruthlessness that the Order of the White Lotus has towards, world affairs. I think, especially later on when Kavik meets Do again, discussing stuff with Yangchen, you really get to see sort of their their worldview on the affairs of things. So to sort of get the start of it through just learning the sort of, three sort of ideas and the mentalities and just terms of, battle when they do have to confront people, goes a long way to show, where their actual ideas and philosophies really lie, much more than just sort of the beauty, the truth, the sort of equalness that they sort of, leave for people to see on the surface.
Next section is quite interesting. We get kind of like a kind of spy infiltration sequence here with Kavik on a Unarak. So, Kavik gets out of Bin which is where the safe house was. It's under the Gidu Shrine, which is kind of interesting. So it's described here that the Order of White Lotus there actually get him out of the city easier than Yangchen did, which is an interesting comparison. But then they actually have to sneak into Agna Kel-A. So they get into their kind of canoe, they go out, they turn it upside down with them still inside of it. A Unarak creates like a kind of water bubble for them to breathe in, and like Kavik kind of stabilizes some stuff, and they do this crazy like underwater pseudo submarine thing as they go into basically a ice tunnel under the surface and then go up it into like a secret safe house basically built into the ice on the kind of outskirts of Agna Kel-A, where they're met by another White Lotus operative here, Ivalu, who initially criticizes Kavik because things got a little bit sketchy towards the end and Kavik had to like improvise, but Ayunarak praises what he did. We do learn what Ayunarak's title within the Order of the White Lotus is. She is the Executor, which is interesting. They don't really explain what this means as such, but it's a relatively high position within the Order of the White Lotus, but it doesn't seem to be the absolute highest potentially, but still quite interesting that we learned about that. They quickly get the information about like, okay, what's going on with Yangchen? She's here, her animals are still in the city, the lemurs are out the back basically near the spirit oasis. They've been there for a day, and all of a sudden they realize, wait, she's not in there, but her lemurs are there. So she went in but isn't actually there. Oh no, she's done something kind of crazy. So they rush through the city. They do it stealthily. It's even described here, even with the Avatar's life potentially in danger, they sacrificed speed for secrecy. Again, the difference in philosophy between Yangchen and the White Lotus, of course, going on here. But they get inside the spirit oasis, and initially Yangchen isn't there. Kavik sort of like looks away for a second, looks back, and suddenly Yangchen is there. So she's literally just kind of phased back into the physical world. She's in the Avatar state still, fighting off the fog of lost souls. Eventually, after a little bit of an action sequence here, Kavik uses the water from the spirit oasis to kind of like throw it over Yangchen, and this sort of like acts as kind of like almost holy water here, sending the fog of lost souls away, getting rid of it from Yangchen. And so we get this kind of reunion here, and immediately the owl Yangchen conflict comes back up here of like, this is why spiritual journeys are meant to be taken with partners, basic safety. And Yangchen is just like, you're not my boss. And so yeah, we have the reunion here. We weren't expecting this early on. Yangchen interacting with the White Lotus and Kavik within like 3-4 chapters. So really interesting ground here. But I like that they did this straight away. It allows the entire book to have a lot of focus on the core dynamic, Avatar and companion, post-betrayal of Kavik, especially from the first book. This was the right thing to do, definitely. But what are your thoughts on the rest of this chapter?
Yeah, I think the fact that they're meeting up so early, it gives them a lot of time to sort of explain and sort of have the relationship essentially rebuilt up, right? Because, it's been sort of torn asunder from, the betrayal of the last book and everything like that. And especially with, Kavik being with the Order of the White Lotus and everything that entails, there's a lot of baggage that needs to be sort of, unraveled here in order for them to have any sort of hope of, having any sort of decent, working relationship, let alone what else could be, beyond that. So yeah, I think, this whole sort of setup for getting him into the city was really cool. It definitely, it's really cool, essentially like a spy sort of scene, of infiltration scene into the city, because, like you noted, they do get out of Ben-Hur, really easily, which I don't know, maybe that just means that it's so sort of corrupt, even with sort of the changes that have happened, that they're able to get out rather quickly there. But getting into the Northern Water Tribe, or especially the capital city, essentially is quite a feat in itself to actually get through. But no, I think that scene was pretty cool. They're using their abilities there, and to see that even though that they're both Unarak and Kavik are really good, they still sort of struggle with this sort of inverted, capsized, submersible sort of infiltration of this area here. But yeah, no, I think it's it's cool that he's able to sort of use, I guess, sort of what he's learned before in order to save Yangchen here, even if this isn't sort of the best way that they could go about re-meeting each other. But considering what happens in the next couple of chapters, maybe this was sort of a better way to sort of just lay everything out in the open to begin with.
Mm-hmm. And when we get into the next chapter, coming to the table, they do get straight around to having a meeting. I like the note right at the start that they go to this private home, and Kavik has no idea if this is like a secret home for the Avatar or a secret home for the Order of the White Lotus, because like he's dealing with both, crazy, like, important entities in the world, and there's still that sense of like Kavik is just this kind of normal guy from the Northern Water Tribe, and he happens to be in a room with the Avatar and like someone super high up in the White Lotus, and he feels out of place. But yeah, the discussion begins after like they're very at odds with each other here. She's like, "Oh, Kavik, you've joined the Order of the White Lotus." He's like, "I had no other choice." Again, establishing that like they offered me protection in all of this. They protected my family. I think it is in all of this explained that his parents have gone back to live in the north, so they kind of get that out of the way. And so he has used what he does know already about unanimity to kind of get more involved with the White Lotus, and also that the kind of Kalyan is kind of involved in this to a certain degree, about like they'll help him to protect his brother to a certain degree as well. And she's kind of like, at least he's consistent, doing things for his family, but they haven't fully addressed everything just yet. She does straight out kind of call them out for being like, instead you've leaked information to the Earth King. She says that's a baseless accusation, but that I guess I'll research if that actually is the case. I'm pretty sure the book kind of makes it clear that that likely is the case, that the Order of White Lotus did get it leaked out, because there's a bunch of mentions about the fact that there's like people in locations who they haven't spoken to in years, and all this sort of stuff, that like there are whole parts of the organization that doesn't know what other parts are going on, so there's lots of room for leaks to happen. There's one section where they get across the idea of just like that, it seems like this amazing kind of like organization with all these people who care about truth and beauty, but like the reality of it is like a lot of them have kind of like questionable pasts, and like is it as like strong of a loyalty as you'd maybe think? So there's room for like bad stuff to happen within the organization, basically. But when we finally get down to it, what happens is Unarak, one of the first things she says to Yangchen is effectively, please take the kid back. So immediately she's kind of like, just, let him become your companion again, go with you. But they're very open about this. Yes, this will be basically a White Lotus spy alongside you at all times. He will report information to us, but you get your companion back, we get information, we'll work together to try and end the Platinum Affair. We'll speak peace into the ears of Chief Oyaluk and Lord Gonryu, and you can try to do things with Feishan and make it all work in that way. And this doesn't seem to be getting anywhere because Yangchen doesn't want to deal with the White Lotus. There's some fun character dynamics going on here. Kavik and Yangchen have their first back and forth. He very much gets across that I'm sorry for everything that has happened, but I think you should think about this. Is it so bad having someone to watch over your shoulder? and so on. He then asked about, how are our friends doing? Yang Chen initially thinks he means the combustion benders, but he's like, no, actual friends, Taigum, Akudan, Jujinta, they're fine. But again, she does make it clear that, like, Taigum and Akudan have had to leave their home in Jandari because of basically what you did. That will take time for them to get over. He wants to kind of earn the forgiveness here. She's still a little bit kind of doubtful because she still doesn't fully trust him. But we kind of get back on track. Yunarak finally sort of manages to say the right thing, but she kind of also forces Yang Chen's hands by saying that, like, oh yeah, I brought Kavik into the north, but I can't actually get him back out. If they find him, he's probably done for. Only you can get him out. Also, if you work with us, it will end the Platinum Affair quicker. It'll work better for both of us. And Yang Chen can't really argue with that. So we get the kind of, reluctant agreement where, like, they don't even say it out loud. It's just like, okay, fine. There is another section of this chapter. It's 2 weeks earlier, but we'll get to that in just a second. But what are your thoughts on this big conversation?
Yeah, I mean, they're really sort of button heads at this point here because they really, Yang Chen, she understands, sort of the White Lotus and sort of their history and sort of, how they've tried to manipulate things and how they've pretty much have been the cause for the current issues that they're currently sort of stuck with. So even though the White Lotus is, saying that they're going to help her and, end the Platinum Affair and everything's going to be good, Yang Chen still has this inkling of feeling of how, they're the cause of the leak, they're the cause of the Platinum Affair in the first place, and how, at the end of the day, their sort of, allegiance to sort of making things better always sort of comes at a cost, and it always comes from like a specific sort of angle. So, her sort of, idea of, reluctantly sort of working with them is always sort of, comes with it at a cost, which not that Yang Chen isn't sort of willing to sort of go to, pretty extreme measures for certain, situations, but she always has sort of the grander scheme or the better outlook, or, at least tries to keep the more positive spin on things. Not that that always works, but, that's where she comes from, where the White Lotus, as we learn later on, doesn't really have that sort of in their end goal perspective. They're sort of like super long term, super end goal, sort of, perspective of things, even outliving like any of their like sort of current members. So, it's just a really strong difference of opinions here, even though, Ayunarak does, sort of play the hand that she has in order to sort of to force, Kavik back on Yang Chen, which, who knows, maybe she would have taken him in some sort of form or fashion anyway. But this definitely makes the acceptance, or not acceptance, but sort of the reluctant agreement to take him on, all the more sort of quicker here, which, even Kavik is, isn't fully sort of aware of, how the White Lotus is going to go about things. Like, at least with Yang Chen, like, he would know that he's being thrown in this sort of situation, and in theory could have a choice. With the White Lotus, it seems like he even have even less of a choice here.
Yeah, and that's what this 2 weeks later kind of gets across. The plan for when we meet up with Yang Chen, here's how we'll convince her to kind of, accept you as a kind of known about spy, this kind of weird dynamic. And they're like, yeah, we're just going to be open about it. We're going for persistence, not cleverness. And the reveal here is basically that they want Kavik to be the spy and, yes, report on what Yang Chen does. But ultimately, they want him to secretly try and acquire the information that they kind of know Yang Chen has. She's hiding unanimity somewhere because of what happened in the first book. They want Kavik to get that information, relay it back to them, and then the Order of the White Lotus will claim unanimity for themselves, because this is what Yunarak says. The rulers of the four nations cannot get their hands on these benders, but neither does that mean she can be trusted to make the final call on how to deal with them. Someone has to act with wisdom and foresight when the leaders of the world aren't up to the task. And Kavik is like, you? Us, Kavik. And this is what it's about. So this becomes a major point in the book about, like, every single group involved in this whole situation says something along those lines of like, all these other like idiots think they know how to do with it, but the people who really need to make the decisions on this are the ones who can act and, you know, play the game in the right way. And in a way, like, Yang Chen is the only one who isn't truly kind of talking about things in this way, whereas the Order of the White Lotus, we already know they're playing politics and they've got it wrong in the past. We just got that from the previous chapters. You know, Kalyan, Chai Si, they think they have the right answers, but, you know, they're planning to, you know, mess with the world leaders and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, okay, we really see the sense of like everyone is trying to just play the game of politics around the combustion benders in a specific way. They think they know exactly the correct way to use them. And it just kind of speaks to the complexity of the whole situation. With the setup here being, of course, that we have the reunion of Kavik and Yang Chen. Great, but there's the potential on the horizon for a second major betrayal of Kavik of Yang Chen. And you know he wants actual forgiveness from Yang Chen because we know the type of character that he is, but he's now been kind of forced into a situation like the first book where this time someone else is basically forcing his hand to betray Yang Chen. So it was Kalyan in the first book. This time it's the Order of the White Lotus. And Ayunarak even jokes about it. You know, what kind of monster would betray the Avatar twice? But she knows she's putting him in the situation to do that. So that's the big betrayal, because they didn't really talk about unanimity in the previous scene, but that's actually what it's all about in the background. So I think this is a kind of an effective use of and here was our plan going into the mission and what the truth is. But what are your thoughts on the 2 weeks earlier discussion?
Yeah, I think this worked out well, like you said. I think with it being within the same sort of section that they're sort of talking, and you do actually see sort of the resolution of it. I think, you know, sort of the playback to what their actual plan was turns out pretty well, because it really is sort of straightforward. Like, she even gives like the odds and stuff like that, like a 7 in Chan, 3 in 10, and, you know, how Yang Chen, you know, sort of holds onto grudges and stuff like that. So, like, you know, Ayunarak is pretty aware of the chances of, you know, her various sort of plans working, but no, Ayunarak's clearly been doing this for a long time here, so even with the odds are being low, she's able to sort of, you know, get things to be sort of her way here. And Kavik is, again, just like we've mentioned before, is just sort of thrown in the middle of these, you know, people who have, you know, extraordinarily amount of power, either through, you know, sort of their organization or through their literal sort of abilities that they have. And he's just, you know, he's trying to make the best of a situation that he's somehow found himself in here, even though at the core he seems like, you know, he's a good character and he wants to do things that are right in the world and, you know, sort of the best of his abilities, and he's just sort of, you know, being thrown about here.
Mm-hmm. The next chapter is called Mistaken Identity. So in this one we find out, okay, like there seems to be a running gag here of how Kavik is taken out or into cities. This time he's rolled up in a carpet as a bit of a punishment for his betrayal from the first book. This is how he's taken out of the city this time, because it's a bit like last minute and desperate. So that's the kind of the whole idea here. Throughout this we do get little, again, details about Ayunarak giving him Kavik information sort of like ahead of times on kind of specific details of like, oh, like you should know this about Yang Chen and so on. But she does make it clear at the start, Yang Chen, that like, I'm tolerating your presence for now. Don't go assuming everything's back to normal. How's your brother? And it becomes clear that like he doesn't really know. He has no clue what the exact situation is with Kalyan. He assumes he's just kind of staying undercover, but they don't really know how exactly he's managed to get away with the betrayal effectively from the first book. There is some confusion there about that. And they're just like, yeah, Ayunarak said she'll help me look for him when the time is right. And there's a bit of a connection between the two over this. It's like, yeah, White Lotus, they're good at waiting. Yeah, you might have to wait until the next era to make that one happen, is the idea. But he thinks they're heading for Taku, but first they're going to the Northern Air Temple. And Kavik's immediately like, oh, is the betrayal going to happen sooner rather than later? Am I going to like find the combustion benders here straight away? And it is noted that they have a feeling it might be the Northern Air Temple where they're being held. We know it is. there's a bit of a flashback discussion between Yunarak and Kavik about this, including the fact that the reason she will never use the Western Temple is basically Yunarak's fault, because she doesn't trust the Western Air Temple to be leak-proof anymore. So, interesting kind of little detail there. So they're on kind of Nujian at this point, heading to the Northern Air Temple. At this point, he does ask her to kind of like, you look like really, really tired. Like, you should go to sleep. I will keep watch. And this is where we get kind of, in a way, one of the things that people were very like confused about from the first book. Why did we never see another Yangchen past life kind of possession scene? They just kind of like didn't use it that much in the first book. We actually get one here, more along the lines of what we were expecting. So Yangchen falls asleep, but this time when she kind of like awakes effectively again, she's talking as if she's a different avatar. Kavik has been briefed on this by Yunarak that like, yeah, she doesn't have a strong wall between herself and her past lives. And this is Avatar Goon from the first chapter of the first book. They don't say Avatar Goon, but because the companion of note here is Masosa, we know that this is the connection. And basically what we get from this avatar, and it's very related to what Yangchen is going through, is Yangchen, as Goon says, I'm so close to giving up on them. I'm so tired of fighting on their behalf. Human beings chose their own misery over and over again. Tell me why humanity deserves an avatar, Masosa. I could handle the blame, the finger pointing, if I just knew why. And that's where we get the idea of Kavik having to play along, because he knows he needs to play along with this. That's the best way to kind of calm her down in these situations. And he's like, what do I say here? I can't tell you why we're worthy of a protector. You have to believe we are. And the answer from Goon that he gets is, that's it. That's your only reason? Blind faith that people can change? And Goon kind of laughs. At this point, the kind of possession ends. Yangchen wakes up and is like, oh, guess you knew about this. Did I say anything embarrassing? He does lie to her here, but I think it's the kind of right type of lie here. And he's just like, yeah, you whined a lot. It was something about some sort of a competition. You were complaining to a judge. And she just kind of goes back to sleep again. And she goes back to being Goon for a second and is like, thank you, say, as, she falls to sleep here kind of peacefully for one of the first times, kind of establishing that she is comfortable around Kavik, even if she's not ready to forgive him. So that's an important note in this. But again, this is huge. Like, Kavik has just witnessed an avatar basically say, I am willing to give up on humanity. I've lost like faith in them. And he has to be thinking that Yangchen is probably around the same point, which is the entire point of her character arc in the book. So this is a really nicely done scene here. Yes, I think over the two books you maybe wish they'd used this dynamic a little bit more, but it's particularly effective in this scene overall. But what are your thoughts on this chapter here, Mistaken Identity?
Yeah, I think this definitely was, I guess, a good use of that. I guess, I don't know, it's interesting how that's been such a point of her sort of character and her upbringing, yet it does seem like to some degree, she does, I guess you could say, get like a better hold on it, but she still doesn't have like the best sort of grasp on it. So I don't know. It's interesting, when they choose to use it or how, it comes out. And, this case here, she's, having this come out with a character, that she's previously has been really sort of comfortable with. So it almost seems like maybe that's sort of one of the reasons why it might potentially come to the surface more than others. But the overall sort of crux of the issue is really sort of, important to see sort of, this is a low point for one of the past sort of Avatar lives. And like you're saying, it does, pretty much, mirror reflect, potentially what Yangchen's going through in this sort of situation, and how she's potentially at like a hopeless situation of how to sort of save the three of the nations from coming directly at odds with each other. And that, along with what we learn later on with sort of like her spiritual side, maybe having the same sort of doubts, it sort of doubles over on itself in terms of what is sort of the the real point in saving humanity, generations and generations, after each other here. So to see this sort of, identity sort of come to the surface here, and how, this gets played on throughout the whole book, I think is an intriguing way that they sort of go about sort of framing Yang Chen's character, and, showing that there is hope for humanity overall.
And then with the goon dynamic, of course, the scene referenced in the first chapter of the first book shows you that Gun didn't give up on humanity in the end, because he was there to save that town from that wave. Even though he lost Masosa in that incident, he saved that city. So he finds a way himself, kind of like Yang Chen does, to continue on. But obviously the idea is, like, even in the aftermath of that event, that is considered to be a failure of Avatar Gun, because he lost his companion, but saved a place on the map, basically. Even like the first thing that is said here about the idea of, like, work 100 miracles, you're worthless for not performing 101. That's very much kind of like what Yang Chen is going through in a way. She feels that she's doing everything she possibly can, but one more thing is needed. And then what she has to do to make these things happen is taking her down this other path, and it feels like she's kind of getting no help from anyone, effectively. That's the kind of whole idea here. And again, the whole old iron stuff beginning to come into play, like, that has had a huge effect on her as well. It's really strong, this arc throughout the book. Definitely the way it kind of comes together and uses all this this dynamic. But we will move on to the next chapter, which is called Stomping Grounds. So this is where we basically arrive back at the Northern Air Temple, more or less. It's more of the city nearby the Northern Air Temple, with, like, the hospital and stuff like that. The core thing with this is that by the end of the chapter, Yang Chen knows she's going to be met by a huge crowd, so she drops Kavik off. He walks around on his own, goes into, like, a tea shop, and the people running the tea shop happen to be the rest of Yang Chen's team Avatar. So he happens to, like, basically randomly run into Taegum, Akudan, and Jujinta, and they're of course, like, shocked to see him, but they're also, like, annoyed upon seeing him for the first time, because they didn't expect to meet kind of so randomly like this. So some kind of important kind of things. Also, in a reference to the first book, he does happen to randomly run into the woman that he and Yang Chen helped to save, and her son, who again was revealed to be saved at the end of the last book, highlighting the kind of connection. He also has to kind of stay undercover from her, but he notes it's kind of nice to see them kind of up and about, basically. So, relatively short chapter here, but again, they're really quickly getting to the core dynamics. Like, they're not waiting chapters upon chapters to reintroduce the rest of the team. This is the best way to do it. Just have Kavik randomly, like, fall into meeting everyone very, very suddenly. But any thoughts on this chapter?
Yeah, that feels sort of like in line with some things, like just sort of, Kavik, going around the city, sort of exploring things, or trying to hide from tails, trying to sort of, stay out of trouble, but somehow, winding up, in the end, falling into trouble. And here it's just, his former teammates who clearly don't have, the greatest of feelings of him after, his previous betrayal, even though by the end of it, they do sort of come to the understanding that he is here under the Avatar sort of request. Like, it would be a real crazy coincidence if he was here, under his own power or something like that. Like, I think they give him sort of the benefit that, if he could just sort of disappear, potentially he would, actually do that, or has the ability to do that. But, he does sort of meet them here. They do have that little sort of scuffle with Yujinta here. So to see that he, is still sort of his direct sort of aggressive approach to certain things in, various sort of situations. So to show that their characters are, very much still the same that they are before in this sort of situation here. And I don't know, I like that they do have Kavik use a little bit of his sort of newfound sort of, techniques in waterbending here to show that he does have that sort of added skill to his repertoire here. Not that he, wants to hurt these others in any sort of way here. And considering what you learn about sort of Akudam and them sort of later on with their abilities that we don't quite know about at this point in the story, it's interesting how that sort of played out in this
Hmm.
situation.
And next chapter is also very, very short. This is a case where like these two probably could have been combined into one chapter. But yeah, Jujinta attacks Kavik. There's a nice waterbending move where Kavik gets a kind of cloth, laces it with water, basically freezes it to act as a bit of ice armor, and he's barely fending off like a knife blow from Jujinta here. Akudan kind of steps in to kind of pull Jujinta away, of course. And it is noted that Akudan and Taigum, they're like, they can sort of respect the idea of prioritizing kind of family in a way, because especially for Akudan, family wasn't prioritized for him. So that's a bit of an interesting kind of a dynamic there. Like at least he's consistent about this. You know, Kavik doesn't come across maybe like the best to them in this situation. He does explain that like I never like directly like betrayed you in terms of like giving away your positions or anything like that. But this is just the kind of situation that they're in at the moment overall. Again, he does kind of need to apologize, make an effort with them, because this is why they can't live in the place they've lived all this time, John Deree, anymore. They do discuss Kalyan a little bit, that like he doesn't know where he is overall. Jujinta is a little bit harsh with, the like, we'd probably have heard about it if he was killed, because like they would have found him like in pieces all across the island. But that gets quickly shut down. But the end here is that right as they're it's maybe about to go worse or something like that. Kavik kind of is going to get a chance to prove himself here, because the action starts. A cracking boom, an explosion echoes through the mountains. A combustion blast has gone off at some point in the distance. So this is the start of like the escape sequence here that's happened here. So Kavik realizes that like, oh, it's going to be really difficult to do all this stuff. But yeah, wasn't expecting it to be this stiff of a task, basically. So pretty short one, but kind of like in the first book, it's like, oh, Kavik is going to get a chance to prove himself in the action moments where he often shines, that he is still loyal to the team here. So this has worked out well for him, even if it's like, yeah, I didn't want this to happen. But what are your thoughts on this chapter?
Yeah, I think, meeting them together here, I think, like you said, it's a really good idea to sort of get this, I guess, sort of gathering together really fast, even if this one doesn't have Yang Chen in there to sort of like mediate the sort of situation here. You can see that there's some level of understanding, at least from two of the three of them here, more or less, in terms of, what Kavik had to done. And, I think part of that's just because, they're also from the Northern Border tribe. So they, essentially understand the idea of family, even if, for Akudan, like you said, it didn't quite go the way that, he would have hoped it would have gone. So, this is the whole idea of sort of, where do your duties lie and how do you go about sort of presenting them. And, Kavik is, pretty strong on his idea of, this, what he would have done or what he would have done, had he had the option to do it again here. So I think Jujinta, his perspective on this comes from his sort of, excommunication from his sort of, society that he was part of, and sort of how that sort of, didn't quite turn out well for him. So he has his own viewpoint of things, and obviously he's, much more extreme in the way that he goes about sort of doing things, and his eventual sort of resolution with Kavik as well here. But yeah, it definitely seems like it's the situation that Kavik's yet again been sort of thrown in, and he has this whole sort of internal idea of, how he's going to sort of deal with this, and how, his tasks really, like you mentioned, it just got sort of tougher with sort of the people around him here. But, there's more things going around, and, it has to sort of jump right into the action, like you mentioned.
And next chapter is called Gravity. So this is what Yang Chen was doing while the previous chapter was happening. So she arrives at the Northern Air Temple. She's greeted by a fellow kind of brother at the temple here, Ming Yer, whose bison is actually Nujian's older sister. So we get a little scene of the two bison kind of meeting up again, reuniting. She brings the gifts that Oyaluk, gave her when they left back to the kind of temple here. They're in the process of being kind of unloaded here, basically. And yeah, things seem to be going like all right here. She's kind of introducing herself, and then this is when she hears the tremor in the earth from the explosion, basically. So at this point, we're caught up. And it's interesting, like initially she's completely unable to believe that this is actually happening at this time. She's like, oh, maybe the combustion benders were just showing off their ability to someone or something like that. But no, it's a proper escape attempt, and what it has resulted in initially is a rock slide is happening here, because we're of course up in the northern mountains, and she has to immediately jump into action to protect against the rock slide. And it's a pretty crazy scene here, because like she just jumps into the air, like catches a giant rock on her back, then digs herself into like the cliff face to try and like solidify it, and the sense of pressure you kind of get here is kind of crazy, because like she's clenching her jaw so much from holding the earth up that like she kind of cuts herself and like even cracks her tooth a little bit. So it's the pressure is really gets that across. She asks like the people to help, like if there's any benders, please jump into action, help me out here. But then she watches as the villagers all just flee. And she has to kind of have this moment to herself where she realizes, no, it is not right to be annoyed at the villagers for kind of running away in a situation like this. That is the correct approach here. I'm the Avatar. I'm put in this position as the quote-unquote leader here. I'm the hero. I'm expected to do this stuff. But it kind of frustrates her a little bit that, like, no one has jumped in to necessarily help. She does notice, though, off in the distance that, like, there are a few people running to help her. It is her team, so this is Kavik, Jujinta, everyone running over, but they're not really going to make it in time. And she's just kind of thinking that, like, I need to use the Avatar state here, but if I just activate it under all this pressure, I'll probably destroy the mountain, so I can't really do it just now. But who jumps in? It's Nujian, her bison, and the other air nomads have kind of joined at this point. So there's a bunch of bison that come in to kind of hold up the rock slide. This gives Yangchen the space to kind of take the pressure off, actually properly go into the Avatar state. And this is a very interesting scene. It's probably one of the best like descriptions of like how an Avatar feels when they use the Avatar state in control that we've ever got, because it's not that it's just them in their kind of like normal form in a way, just more powerful. Like it really gets across the idea of like the insane levels of power they have access to has an impact on their kind of thought process, and especially what she's going through. She really kind of almost goes into the sort of like godlike aspect of the Avatar state here, and she's like looking down at the people, look how weak they are without me, and it's almost like it's a non-event, her solving the rock slide, because it's just like it's covered in a paragraph, and the rest of it is like 4 paragraphs of like admiring how powerful she is in a way. It's a really good sense of like she kind of thinks about it like, what if I stayed here? What if I didn't kind of go back to being normal? What would that look like? And that might be the best way to kind of lead people, is to really be the all-powerful Avatar. But right at that moment, the kind of human emotions come back in, and she kind of thinks that like, oh, effectively, I have caused this. I brought the combustion benders here. I'm the reason everyone and anyone is getting hurt in this situation. And this actually causes her to kind of fall out of the Avatar state. So a really kind of nice kind of visual representation of the kind of conflict within Yangchen here. And they even, again, compare it to the old Iron. Her arrogance hadn't spiraled out of control that badly since old Iron. Ming-Yer kind of arrives on the scene. She kind of gives him some orders as she kind of recomposes herself overall. But at this point, she basically gets back on Nujian and heads out to kind of pick up her team. It's a bit of an awkward situation. She sort of notes that if the team was coordinated better, she could have just swooped down and kind of like effortlessly picked them up, but it has to be a bit awkward as she just like throws everyone on board, and they kind of jump into action here. What is it? Alkudan and Taigum are tasked with just kind of telling the abbot what's going on. Kavik and Jujinta are going to check out the other prisoner that they have. So this is Zongdu Honsha. And Yangchen is going to deal with the combustion benders. So that's the kind of whole idea here of like, she notes that like, yep, this is the team I have, but I'm glad I actually have a team, basically. So I think this is another really strong chapter. I think, like I said, one of the best depictions of an avatar in the avatar state, especially with what Yangchen is going through. But what are your thoughts on this chapter, Gravity?
Yeah, I think the depiction of the avatar state in here, like you mentioned, is done pretty well, mainly because we can sort of have the running dialogue of what she's thinking, or her avatar, past lives influence, heightened ability thoughts, as well as her sort of actions that she's actually doing, post being in the avatar state, and pre being in it as well here. So she has the full sort of mental through point here, and you can really see sort of, her idea of, I guess sort of the state of affairs. And it's, I guess this is the point where it's really good that, the avatar does have some sort of, humanity in them, because, without that, this sort of power, could really essentially go pretty unchecked, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when Rava was sort of, just a spirit, the whole idea of, humans in general, even if, she was the light spirit, was, they're still pretty much beneath her, right? Like they're, so insignificant in sort of the grand scheme of things, even though, they're trying to do things that are, to keep the world in balance, right? So here you can see sort of the conflict that they have here, and, Yangchen, with everything that's sort of happened in her, past, up until this point in time with like the affairs of the world, is really sort of, it's almost sort of like egging her on to sort of, keep this more, I guess, sort of authoritarian sort of mindset of things, right? Like she would just be the end all, the be all, like, this would be sort of, her reason for just, choosing what's right in the world, and everyone else would essentially have to follow suit, right? Like there's, to her in this sort of mindset, there's no other power. And when she does hear sort of the other clash of power from the other, combustion benders, she makes note of that, like there shouldn't really be any other power that should rival her in this sort of situation, right? Like she should be the end all, the be all here, which, in the avatar state, she probably could, deal with them without having to resort to sort of the specific techniques that she uses later on at the end of the book, right? Maybe not, or she could just overwhelm them pretty quickly. So it's definitely something to see how this plays out in the situation. This definitely, it's like it's an action part of the book for sure, but it's also like a thinking action part, because, like you said, like the actual resolution of the rock slide here is done pretty quickly. Like it's a huge thing before she's in the avatar state, but, it is, pretty quickly resolved once she has sort of the backing of the air nomads and the other air bison, which is, it's pretty cool. That would be a really cool visual to see, how that actually sort of, plays out with all of them sort of holding back the rock slide together. I think that would be a pretty cool way, and they describe it in a pretty interesting way. But yes, it's definitely an interesting sort of situation for this, chapter, especially since in the beginning of it, she's getting all the praise from the people, right? Like there's almost a stampede to come and see her, and she's, about to give another speech because, she's been doing so well in this, this town that she's essentially created, right? And then everyone sort of turns their back on her. So it's a really quick 180 in just one chapter of, how things play out.
Yeah. The landslide, like the text on how she deals with the landslide is literally the landslide. She tilted her head. It does go on to explain that, like, she pushed it back up, she compressed it so it's smaller now, a memorial to her deed. But like, in terms of the actions that she took, she tilted her head and dealt with the situation. Like that's the sense of power that we're dealing with here. And the other Yangchen content to remember throughout all of this is escape from the spirit world Yangchen. The advice she gives to Yangchen, and the question Aang asks is, why isn't the avatar an all-powerful being? And this is kind of in a way why it's so important that Yangchen gives the answer that she does, like why it's important for the Avatar to be a human, understand what it is to be human, understand that people make mistakes, that even the Avatar makes mistakes. That's what Escape from the Spirit World is all about. Um, I like that. I like that FCE kind of has utilized like all of the previous Yangchen material like really effectively in this, where like the rift has been heavily referenced with the All Iron incident, extra importance placed on that, Escape from the Spirit World, and even the advice in the finale kind of comes up with the idea of like, you know, your duty as the Avatar, you have to sacrifice your own spiritual beliefs, like what we're going to see in a couple of chapters, and in terms of like the kind of conflict in a way
Yeah.
within her own like being an air nomad, like her exile from a whole air temple. Like that's kind of unexpected, but she did that because it's kind of what she had to do to be the Avatar. Like it all comes together, I think, really nicely with the previous material. But yeah, we move on to the next chapter. So this is second option. So we see what Jujinta and Kavik are doing, and yeah, Yang has put Jujinta in charge of this duo, and Kavik has to follow him. He doesn't really like this. It plays into their kind of bickering dynamic for most of the book, where they're very kind of like rival kind of dynamic going on here. But Jujinta knows where he's going here. He's been in the Northern Air Temple a lot more than Kavik has. He's guiding them around the place. He's called Master Jujinta. Everyone knows who he is. So they're heading for Honshu. There is an incident right before they arrive where there's a bunch of people who stand in their way. And Jujinta's prepared to get the knives out and start like cutting people apart, but Kavik realizes, wait, these are just normal people. Like you guys have just been hired to stand here and kind of get in our way. One of them tries to attack and gets kind of like knocked to the ground. And Kavik kind of saves their lives here from Jujinta by being like, hey, we can deal with you. You guys should probably go. So they finally make their way into the room where Honshu is, and they find him dead. And the reveal here is that he was killed with a kind of a thin implement through the side, like through the armpit, like heart-lung channel here. And it's noted here as well. There's a pool of blood, but next to it is a pool of water. This is the melting weapon. So he was killed with some sort of a thin icicle spear type thing. And Kavik recognizes this as the kind of signature kind of weapon of Kalyon's waterbending style, still in the process of melting. So they've like just missed Kalyon here. But the reveal, of course, is that he has arrived here, assassinated Zongdu Honshu, and left. And obviously later on we sort of learn that he's assisted with the combustion benders like escaping as well. So really getting across his skill here, that he just got in and out, and they were not able to save Honshu at all. Now this is also a big kind of turn in a way for Kalyon, because we learned in the first book that like Kalyon was brought into the whole errand running situation, this new ambitious path for him, because of Honshu, and in a way betrayed Chaisi, giving unanimity to Honshu as part of that friendship. So how has this kind of reverse situation happened here? Has he just exchanged loyalties? We're kind of waiting to see what happened here. But this is the sort of shocking twist. We knew from the description of the book someone got assassinated. This was probably the likely option, but it's interesting how it's actually gone down here. But what are your thoughts on this chapter and this big reveal?
Yeah, I think this was, I guess we were expecting it, like you were saying, but, you know, the fact that, you know, Zongdu, or former Zongdu Henshe, was sort of quarantined off here. He was just sort of led away here, stuck in the air temple, and, you know, was sort of done off with because of, you know, orders from above on high, because he was essentially like a liability, right? Like that was the whole reason why he was in this prison here. No, it definitely speaks to, I guess, sort of the seriousness of the situation here. And with Kavik's brother, the means that he was able to sort of, you know, coordinate this whole sort of affair to happen, you know, it really speaks to his sort of abilities, like you mentioned, and the fact that he was able to sort of, you know, scaffolding, climb into this room that's, you know, the Northern Air Temple isn't essentially like a easy place to get around, and, you know, it's pretty dangerous, especially for, you know, anyone that's not an air nomad. So regardless of anyone having their sort of bending, it's sort of like pretty a treacherous sort of situation to do this, but apparently he's able to do this without essentially being detected, and it's only because he was a bit sort of sloppy and a bit sort of lazy with his sort of water bending, and the fact that his brother was there to sort of investigate it, that he was able to sort of be found out directly here. So yeah, definitely speaks to his skill, and sort of the brothers and their sort of comparison with each other, and how that gets played on later on as well.
Next chapter is the duel. So while the last chapter was happening, this is what Yang Chen was doing. I like the start of this. She had to choose from 3 different isolated huts. So they've separated the combustion benders, of course. It's also noted that they're not held in the Northern Air Temple itself. It's in like different parts of like the mountain range, like surrounding the temple. So she really has to make a choice. Like if she goes to one, she can't go to the other one. She makes the decision to go to Ying Su's hut because, of course, that was actually the one where we at least established a bit of a positive relationship with in the first book, because Yang Chen saved Ying Su from the arrow wound from Jujinta, of course, instead of sucking the air out of the room and killing her. So as she arrives there, the scene that she encounters looks like Ying Su has escaped and killed her 6 air nomad guards. But when she gets really close, like she's about to like meteorite strike Ying Su in this situation, but she stops because she sees that Ying Su is like basically telling the airbenders to like be quiet. So she's actually helping them here. Even though she's holding on to one of them, she's just preventing him from like screaming out loud to get their position. So what becomes clear here is that they are being fired on. Ying Su is being fired upon by one of the other combustion benders in this situation here. So they get to talking, Yang Chen and Ying Su, and she's like, Thapa is somewhere on the other side of the valley. He's probably already got Zhao Yun, and now he's trying to kill me. So it's this crazy reveal that theoretically we're already down a combustion bender, and now of the 2 left, one is trying to kill the other. So what's going on here? And there's a big situation here where, of course, Yang Chen feels really guilty. She wants to make sure none of her brothers get killed here. So she tries to bring a Nu Jian in, has to bring him in low so he's not a big target. There's a very cool sequence here where she creates like 2 giant kind of covers of earth, and sends them kind of spiraling in 2 different directions, like forcing Thapa to choose which one to hit. Ying Su and Yang Chen under one, the 6 air nomads under another. They manage to get away, so Nu Jian gets them to safety, and Ying Su and kind of Yang Chen kind of trick Thapa a little bit by kind of like finding a ditch to kind of like dive into. So they're safe, kind of, but they're still kind of being bombarded here. So it's a nicely constructed kind of situation where like Thapa is described as basically being in like this perfect position where like Ying Su can't fire back at him because he's on the top of a ridge basically, and he has the high ground on them. So yeah, I suppose this is quite an important chapter. But so what are your thoughts on the chapter up to this point here? The interesting turn here of like Ying Su is kind of helping everyone here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it seems like, there's been some rapport, for better or worse, with, sort of the combustion benders and the air nomads here, right? So, that's, that'll be established even more later on here. But, the fact that, this is a situation that, they didn't quite expect here. And, even though the air nomads were here as like their guards, right? Like they're not necessarily, trained in the best sort of practices for this sort of situation, and especially with the abilities of combustion bender and how they later explain, how the sounds and everything can affect, air nomads and their sort of abilities that they have. This, even though they seem like they would be the perfect sort of, jailers in this situation, there's also a lot of sort of disadvantage as well. And, with Tapa being in this sort of perfect high ground position here, it really does put them all at sort of a disadvantage here. And, even Yang Chen, with all of her abilities that she has, unless she just, sort of goes full blown out sort of, spirit mode in this sort of situation, even she's at sort of a disadvantage at the situation. So it definitely, at this point in time, it feels pretty dire at the situation that
Hmm.
they're in.
Yeah, so Yang Chen and Yingsu get to kind of talking a little bit here. The question is asked, like, wait, how do you actually know it's Thapa and not Zhao Yun attacking us? And she's like, oh, blast pattern. Also, I know Thapa. He's a backstabbing rat lick son of a worm. So we know that from how he handled the Honsha situation, trying to like extort him for like a crazy amount of money. This is exactly Thoppa's personality here. He knows that he's important and makes that very clear to everyone that he encounters. There's a bit of a joke here about the whole like, it's kind of funny that you guys are called Unanimity, and then Yingsu's just like, well, it makes sense. Like the name shouldn't reveal what the project actually is. Hence why we aren't using Skyflower or Drumbeat as the actual name for the project. So then we get a very important reveal that Yingsu says that this whole scheme was busted from the beginning. Ever since I got off that ship and saw Honsha's stupid grinning face, and it's like, oh, you weren't supposed to see that. No, we were originally going to deploy in. And Yingsu's thinking to herself, like, should I reveal this or not? But then realizes the situation that she's in, and it's like, I've got nothing out of staying quiet for, like, Chai-Si's sake. I'm just going to tell Yang Chen. No, the plan was always to make a mess of Taku, not Bin and we were kind of switched at the last kind of second, and we rolled out earlier than expected. The boss, Kalyan, came along and did this. So this is this important thing, and Yang Chen confirms, what date were you supposed to be in Taku? And it's the date of the convocation, which is the big event we're waiting to get to with the world leaders and the Zongdus. That's happening in just a few days from now. So this is the reveal of what Chai-Si was planning to use for like the first kind of mission for Project Unanimity. And this is basically 3 combustion benders to take out the 3 world leaders effectively. That instead of a siege situation like Honsha ended up doing, she was planning to use them as like these perfect long range assassins, which is a much more effective use of them. So very interesting reveal there. But then it gets kind of serious. It's like Yingsu's like, wait, so which one of us is going to do this? Are you actually going to go after Thoppa and get him, or am I going to have to do it? And it comes up here that, of course, like Yingsu doesn't know about like how exactly Yang Chen actually defeated them all, because she didn't experience the like take the air out of the room technique. So there's a bit of a mystery kind of going on here. Yang Chen's just like, I need him alive, but Yingsu points out the reality of the situation, which is that, no, you don't. I'm talking to you now. I'm working with you. You don't need more than one of us, basically. Take him out. He's not some, like, misunderstood, like, pawn. He's a terrible person. Like, throw me into the air and I will take him out. And so Yang Chen's being tasked with this idea of, like, effectively, like, one of us is going to have to kill him to get out of this situation. Are you going to be a part of this or not? And there's no time to think about this because Ming Yer is arriving in thinking he's going to, like, save the day. But he's just going to become a target here. So there's this kind of crazy situation, which is like, does Yang Chen jump up? But if she jumps up, that will alert Thoppa to where Ying Su is. And so Yang Chen just has no idea what to do here. So she does just leap into the air to try and save her brother. And it just feels like this kind of pointless thing. She's not going to reach him in time. Was this the correct thing to do here? Her weakness basically coming up here. And it's a cool sequence that she's just like, she hears the sound of the combustion bending blast go off. Drumbeat, yep, that's a good name. Then the kind of visual effect of it. Skyflower, yeah, that would have been nice too. I can't protect them all. And she kind of thinks to herself, like, this would have gone differently if I had my glider. And what's so interesting about this is that we end the chapter with that. As we start the next chapter, we'll find out the net result of what happened here, but we won't actually get the details of how the details of this actually kind of panned out. What specifically happened until much later on in the book, like last couple of chapters basically. So an interesting kind of multi-layer reveal kind of ends up happening here, where you're led down the path of thinking one thing happened when actually something different happened. But big action sequence here, and important reveals with the whole Taku as the truth of the plan for unanimity. But what are your thoughts on this section of the book?
Yeah, this was definitely a really good one. I like, another one of the action scenes that, some people say there wasn't quite as many of, but I think this does a pretty good idea of just showing, I guess, sort of the constant under fire from a combustion bender and how that sort of can pin down multiple targets, even with just one, combustion bender and their sort of abilities alone. And, it feels like, at this point in time, the combustion bender is sort of, I guess you could say, like, abilities isn't as refined as we see in Avatar or in Korra's time. Like, there's limits to what they can do and their abilities and how they actually function, which makes sense. That's essentially where, understanding this is the first time that these abilities have been, created, right? So, of course, they wouldn't be fully fleshed out. And we do get to see a little bit more information about that when we learn about sort of the real sort of resolution of this chapter. But yeah, you get to see sort of the stress under fire here from Yangchen and how she, her indecision here, like they mentioned, is really sort of, hindering her ability here. And, this is, the point where, maybe if she was a more experienced Avatar, maybe she would have been able to make the decision here. But this definitely is probably one of the situations that leads to her sort of, ideas and philosophy on being the Avatar in the future, just having to deal with the situation and her indecision and how, Mingyur, eventually sort of ends up in the next chapter. It definitely, is a sort of a sad state of events of what actually happens here. And there's, maybe having her glider situation, maybe it wouldn't have. I don't know. There's many different ways that this could have played out, and it seems like she's trying to do everything she can in the situation, right? Like she uses that sort of ability that she has to sort of get a lay of the land by understanding the wind and everything like that. So like she understands what's going on, but it's just with her current, I guess, sort of idea of things, she's not able to proceed in sort of the best sort of way here. And the chapter sort of comes to a halt at the end, which I think, looking, it seems like it's pretty abrupt looking back on it now, but I think when you're sort of reading through this for the first time, it sort of all sort of flows pretty well together, and it just sort of, just cuts off and just keeps things going and keeps the motivation going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some cool stuff here, like the Order of the White Lotus reference, where Yangchen kind of does the Pian Dao kind of visualization technique of like look at something for a second and then fully visualize it. And he asks Sokka to paint it, but Yangchen is just getting the lay of the land. That's really nice. But the other point here is just that like Yangchen's hesitation is also like it's the kind of her humanity in the situation coming into play. Like she doesn't want to kill people. She doesn't want to be responsible for the death of people. So that's why she has the conflict here. Whereas if she was the godlike Avatar, she would just make the rational choice, which she is actually the one she doesn't like, as was referenced multiple times in the Oil Look chapter. So it's like trying to find the correct blend, and we know this is a problem for like pretty much all avatars, where like sometimes you have to make the emotional choice and protect the people because of the humanity. Sometimes the rational choice for the world is the more important choice, and it's just finding the right kind of blend in the situation overall. But our last chapter for today, chapter 13 here, is going to be mitigation. So to avoid ending on a massive cliffhanger for this episode, here's what happens here. So the explosions have stopped here, so we see everyone kind of coming into the hospital at this point. Yangchen eventually comes through the doors. Everyone's waiting for her. And she's immediately like, Corden, we need water like last time. She's come in the doors and she's holding Mingyur. So straight away you're like, oh, okay, so she seems to have solved the situation from before. But Mingyur is in a pretty bad way. And so straight away you're kind of wondering, like, what's happened here? How is Mingyur like badly injured, but Yangchen seemingly like completely okay? What's actually happened? So what happens here, Kavik is holding Mingyur in water. And instead of starting immediately the kind of full body healing, it's described here that like Yang Chen stabbed the man instead, and she basically does some kind of like kind of pseudo operation kind of stuff with waterbending here, of just like piercing him with points of water. And then this kind of really cool thing where like she kind of takes control of the big water bubble and sort of like kind of pumps it to kind of reinflate his lungs, because it's described that like his lungs have kind of collapsed. That's the kind of key medical problem with him and what's happened. Like this is the effect of like a combustion blast on someone. So there's some major kind of healing that happens here, but they do manage to save Ming Yer, though they note, I forget if it's exactly here or in the next chapter, that he might not hear again. So obviously the idea, his eardrums have burst very badly as well. Makes sense from a kind of pressure blast fundamentally. And yeah, we do get to kind of talking. Kavik eventually gives the report on what happened to Han She. And it's a real kind of devastating blow here, because this is then immediately followed up by 2 stretchers coming into the room, and it's the bodies of Zhao Yun and Ying Su in the background. So like kind of confirming to us both of them are dead. So, you know, of the 4 hostages effectively here, 4 prisoners, 3 of them are dead. It is a kind of failure on Yang Chen's part, because like Thapa, of course, has gotten away in all of this. So, pretty, you know, crazy kind of turn of events in all of this. That's kind of going on. Things get a little bit worse while, like, in the middle of this, she's still doing all of her medical work. The village captain comes over and is like, "Hey, what happened to the stuff that like Chief Oiluk gave you? Like, we need them." And Kavik is kind of trying to be like, "Hey, not the right time," and Yang Chen just doesn't want to deal with him, and he just continues to kind of push the point. Where are these? You know, please talk to me. You know, you need to go look and find that stuff. You better have a plan to fix this. And then it's just described that like Yang Chen clenches her fist, and it's this crazy airbending thing where she just like launches him out the door into the sky. And like he's going to die if he hits the ground. Like she violently like sends this guy flying out the door. She's kind of really lost her temper here. And there's like a whole action sequence here as like Kavik saves this guy with he basically uses a Unirak's like 3 tricks for like water bending here, and again creates a kind of cushion using the rubbish chute that's around the place with water bending. And the guy, when he gets up, is still kind of like, "Oh, I can't believe that happened," but she's going to hear about this. And so Kavik is like, why did they even bother to save this guy? He's just going to give out to Yang Chen kind of in the aftermath of... again, there's some important stuff that happens after this, but we'll cover that up to now. But yeah, major thing there, the reveal of like the death of 2 of the combustion benders here, and Yang Chen really losing it in this moment here. What are your thoughts on these scenes?
This is really another one of those moments for Yang Chen where it's just, you know, everything's coming to a head and it's not really in the best sort of situation. I mean, even if she is, you know, she is able to sort of save Ming Yer's, you know, life essentially here with the help of Kavik. You know, this is like the worst case scenario for everything that could have gone. And, you know, it's, you know, she's, you know, taking it pretty hard here. And it definitely does feel like she really did like sort of lose control in that sort of situation where sending the town chief sort of like flying for a second there, and, you know, Kavik using his newfound, I guess, sort of techniques that he has in order to save him, which I did think that was pretty cool. Him sort of like scanning the area, you know, sort of being able to take things in a glance and able to sort of act upon that sort of action. I think that was definitely a pretty cool use of this. And I don't know, I wonder if Yang Chen did this more so just because she knew that, you know, Kavik was there and probably wouldn't have, you know, sort of let, you know, her sort of temper sort of get the better of her here in this situation. I don't know. I wonder, you know, how that could have turned out there. But yeah, it's definitely, I don't know. It definitely seems like that was just a worst case scenario and another, you know, instance of, you know, sort of the humanity not really sort of understanding what's really going around in the bigger picture of things.
Next up, there is a kind of debrief about, okay, here's what actually kind of happened. Ming Yer is going to be okay, but she doesn't know if you'll ever hear again. The townsfolk aren't really questioning things because they do assume it was mostly a rock slide. And there's a lot going on. They weren't super focused on the explosions, so they don't have to explain away a lot here. After this, we get the explanation on, okay, how did this all happen? Yangchen has done the investigation, and yeah, apparently, her brothers were basically too nice to the combustion benders. Thapa had formed a relationship with them and asked to send a message, a letter back to his mother. They read it, and it didn't seem like that there's anything really in it. It's just like gibberish, basically. So they just were like, why not? I guess there's something here. But it was obviously a coded message, which we know about from the first chapter. Of course, Chai-Si knew what was being talked about. So it confirms to us for sure at this point that, like, okay, Chai-Si was the one who ordered this rescue, and it's kind of crazy kind of what kind of happened here. It's like, had the resources to survey the mountains, prepare a net under his cliffside hut, coordinate his jump into a freefall dive during a guard rotation. I found the rigging they left behind. Quality work. So it's a real kind of spy infiltration thing here to get Thapa out. Then we do get the confirmation that, yes, Thapa betrayed everyone. He killed Zhao Yun and Ying Su. They're dead. But other than those two, no one else has died. So even Zhao Yun and Ying Su, and Thapa, none of their guards were killed in this either. So Yangchen has managed to somehow save all of her brothers here at the Northern Air Temple from being killed. There is a bit of a discussion about, like, wait, why would Chai-Si want her, her assets killed? And Yangchen's just like, oh, I think I know. Thapa did this himself. Now he's the most valuable piece in the game, and no one likes this. Kavik is like, wow, killing your teammates to get a raise. Not even in Bin-Er would something like that happen. So that's the whole situation here. They bring up that, like, okay, Kalyan did it overall. All they can come to right now is just that, I guess Kalyan chose his second boss over his first boss. And that's really all that they can say about it. The next step is that, okay, Taku is going to be the big thing. This will be where we have to go in the kind of aftermath of this, and they have to figure out kind of what to do from here, basically. So they're going to have to do this on their own. She can't ask for any more help from the Northern Air Temple, of course, as we'll kind of see later on why. So there's some fun stuff here as well, like Kavik noting that, like, hey, you two are just quartermasters in all of this. You probably didn't even get involved in any fighting over there. And we'll find out that that's not quite the truth of the situation overall. So some interesting stuff there with the report. What are your thoughts on the kind of details from this section of the chapter?
Yeah, I like that they had this moment to sort of, debrief the team, to actually see them, at least hesitantly, like, working together to sort of discuss things. They mentioned that they didn't really have, that much time to do this sort of thing. Like, usually things were a lot more sort of rushed here. So the fact that they're able to take like a second here, despite, things still being very dire, right? Like, the situation in the world hasn't really changed. It's only gotten worse, essentially. But at least they're, trying to sort of, I guess, understand what's happening from different point of views. Kavik, has his own sort of insights from his brother, and how that played out, and how the rest of the team is reluctantly taking what he said at sort of like the face value, and understanding how that plays into sort of the bigger picture of things here. So they're still at ends with each other. They're still tense, but they're at least enough of professionals to work together in this sort of situation, as long as Yangchen is there to sort of hold them together, even though she also still is sort of like showing that she's still sort of like grudgingly sort of like working with him, despite everything that's going on.
So she has everyone else leave the room except Kavik at this point, and so we get a Yangchen Kavik scene here, and she immediately is just like, is that enough for the report to the Order of the White Lotus? There's everything that you need to tell them. You can report about how I failed completely in this instance, all these people who got killed, who are valuable, the most valuable assets in the world. And she kind of wants Kavik to jump in and be like, yeah, I agree, you made a real mess of this. But he's kind of like, no, like I think Ayunarak has a lot to answer for herself before she starts complaining about what you've kind of said and done. And I don't think I need to give my opinion here in what's going on. And that he does commit to the idea of like, yeah, I'm reporting to the White Lotus, but I'm still here helping you. And it's not helpful to like add to the kind of criticism of what's going on here. At this point, Abbot Sanam walks into the room. He thanks Kavik for his help. He also says, like, you have a knack for healing. Sometimes the greatest medicine is providing the right assistance at the right time. At this point, we get things kind of turn a little bit more serious, and it's like Kavik feels he should leave, but Yangchen is just like, no, stay. Tradition dictates a witness. And we get this very interesting kind of air nomad kind of ritual here. It's effectively how they exile someone. So Sonam says, Sister Yangchen, the community of the Northern Air Temple desperately needs a boon only you can provide. After you next leave these sacred grounds, our existence depends on you returning with treasures of great importance. And she says, O elder, I devote myself fully to this cause. What shall I retrieve from the four corners of the world? And he says, a blue panda lily, the shadow of a breeze, the sinews of a spirit, and most important of all, the material possession that will fill the emptiness that lies in every human being. And Kavik is like, well, does this mean what I think it means? And she says, when you next see me, you will see these jewels, so I swear. And he says, thank you, Sister Yangchen. Carry the love of your people with you always. And he leaves. He has a tear in his eye as he leaves the room. And Kavik fully figures it out and is just like, no, this can't be true. And Yangchen realizes he figured it out, and he's like, you're the Avatar, overrule him. But she can't. Yangchen has been exiled from the Northern Air Temple. So what are your thoughts on this little sequence here?
Yeah, this was pretty sad and pretty, serious in the way that they sort of go it about here, because it really does feel like it has a good bit of, sort of emotional backing on it. Like, this isn't something to be sort of taken lightly. Like, Yangchen, pretty much feels like essentially like a physical blow here from, being, never able to return to the Northern, Air Temple because of her actions and what she's done, which, she noted that, the whole situation was bad from the beginning, right? Like, she didn't enjoy, having to put, her people in this sort of situation and having them, have essentially control over other people. And, it pretty much, literally blew up in sort of the worst way possible here. So it's definitely, something that she would have, liked to avoid in all sort of instances. And it's unfortunate that now, she essentially has two temples that she doesn't really want to go back to at all because of very certain reasons. And, of course, she's the Avatar. She could, go most places and be sort of welcomed, right? But, the fully, feel truly at home, at places is something that it's a luxury that she seems to have lost twice over now, right? So it's definitely, a big sort of impact on her. And it seems, even though she's stoic in her sort of, response to it, I think you get the emotion from Kavik in this instance on, how much this, should essentially mean to her.
Yeah, it's a really interesting scene because when you're reading it, you're kind of like with Kavik, like, I can't believe they're exiling her for this. And you understand like why to a certain degree, in that, like, yes, effectively Yangchen has brought this near catastrophe on the Northern Air Temple, and she has done stuff that has kind of taken them away from their kind of monk-like roots. And there's a mention like a chapter or two ago about like Mingyur calling the guards like his men rather than his brothers, and that's like, ooh, are we heading in the wrong direction here? But it also speaks to the kind of maybe more negative side of the air nomads, that like this is the kind of vague way they kind of exile someone, that it's not a serious discussion, it's this like ritual almost, that like if you're not super paying attention to what's being said, like it doesn't almost come across that way, that it's not really like she's exiled, she's on this mission, but it's a mission she can never accomplish. And it's kind of like, well, that's kind of like the Zuko, you can come back when you capture the Avatar style thing. Like, he was sent out thinking it's an impossible task, but in this case it actually is impossible. A shadow of a breeze and stuff like that. So it's just like we're comparing a lot of the stuff, like say like the Order of the White Lotus. A lot of the presentation in this era is to be like, they are not the most amazing characters of this era. You are meant to be critical of the Order of the White Lotus, and in a way you're kind of meant to be critical of the air nomads here, because this is very similar to the whole like Kelsang in the Kyoshi era is kind of dishonored by the temples, and he's not really regarded as the true master that like he actually is, because of what he did during the like Dao Fei kind of uprising. And anyone who knows Kelsang as a character knows that he probably should be honored, but because they have such specific kind of things within their culture, the mere fact that he's like broken one of those things, a complete kind of black mark against his very character, even though like he's such an important person to an avatar and has done so much in the world and all this sort of stuff. It's an interesting one, because I think you get some of this in the like Avatar Legends RPG, that like, yeah, the air nomads have their own problems as well when it comes to this stuff, of like when they're super strict about a lot of their rituals, when they're not, how open they should be to outsiders, that sort of thing. And like there are eras where they're more open and it feels like it changes them, but then the isolation is not the correct road for them to go down either. It's an interesting one. In this case, I don't think you feel like she views it herself as like, no, I needed to take this punishment, and this is the correct thing to do. But Kavik is upset that she is not showing the emotion she should be showing for this. The most important bit, especially being like, what about the sunset from the tower, your sister's favorite place? And then she like screams at him, "I said it doesn't matter." And she like puts out the flames in the room. I need to be held accountable. If I can't be an airbender when it comes to my actions, I can at least be an airbender when it comes to the consequences. So I do kind of like that, because like effectively Kavik is sort of almost telling her to like be the avatar above people and just like overrule them. You're right because you're the avatar. But she's like, no, I have to just be an air nomad in this situation and take the punishment like anyone else would, because it's proof like I made a mistake and this sort of stuff. It's a complex situation, but I definitely like it. But do you have any further thoughts on that? Like do you view it as being a bit of a kind of harsh punishment, or do you, like Yangchen, kind of think it's probably needed to happen?
I mean, I think for the results that happened, it probably needed to happen, only because it seems like, for the values that at least they're currently going by, this seems like this is a complete, opposite of how they're currently viewing the world. And they're not, these air nomads at this point in time aren't ready to be sort of, the type of airbenders that are willing to go out and help people directly in sort of physical altercations that are happening. Like they're not like, the ones that we've seen in Korra's time, where, obviously the whole world has changed, and those air nomads, if you, depending on how you consider them, they have a different set of values. These ones, they don't have that sort of mentality. Maybe that's something that they develop, after this point in time, and it takes like a generation or two for that to fully realize. But these ones, even if this was sort of like the start of leading them towards that way, this, out of all the ways that they could have gone about sort of like integrating, more so with like everyone other, or, the other nations' sort of ideas and mentalities, this probably was sort of like the extreme measure of this. And, Yangchen, probably rightfully feels that this, wasn't the way that, if this was even her, sort of idea for something like this, this wouldn't have been the way that she would have gone about it. I think, it probably would have been, nice for her to show, a bit more, which I think, at the end she does, crack a little bit and shows sort of the emotion that she sort of has with this. But, it's definitely sort of not an easy sort of situation that the abbot, wanted to be put in this. And, it's not like this hasn't been brought up before. So it's, it felt like this was something that was leading towards this sort of path here. And, it just, it also just reflects on just the air nomad society in general, and how, at this point in time, this sort of idea, sort of physical sort of violence, altercations, anything like that is, it's at the top list of things that they're trying to avoid. Now, fortunately, none of the air nomads died, although one was, severely injured, and many other were probably, injured as well. But there still was, loss of life, right? So, I guess they're considering that and this factor of, excommunicating her from, this northern air temple here. And I think that's, it's a sad, unfortunate result of this event here.
Yeah, but it's also interesting just that like the abbot here of the Northern Air Temple, like effectively like I suppose the abbot isn't like technically one of the elders of the air nomads, where like he's technically like one of the world leaders from the air nomad point of view, but in a somewhat similar position, like it doesn't seem to come into play the situation of just like what should she have done with the combustion benders, like what is the overall air nomad take on the politics at play in the situation here, because everyone wants these unanimity benders. What was the play here? Because she couldn't have done anything with the Water Tribes, Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation because of the whole Platinum Affair situation and how tense world affairs are. So she either had to like just do it somewhere completely separate on her own, or lean into her own nation. But that gets into the complexities of like she's kind of bringing the air nomads out of their kind of neutral stance in all of this to a certain degree. But that just speaks to the complexities of the situation here. Like it didn't seem to matter for the abbot necessarily what the takeaway was, if this will help or hinder Yangchen in doing what needs to be done. But the final section of this chapter is Kavik gives his report to the Order of the White Lotus. So he sneaks out at nighttime. They describe he uses some of his new kind of subtle spy waterbending moves here to make it seem like he never even left. But again, there's some of these typical kind of arcane, kind of puzzly secret conversations that happen here. It's like warmer than usual this time of year. Underestimate the night at your own risk. You may be right. Can I come in and take a rest? I could trade you a tale from my homeland. Certainly, the wise man always appreciates swapping stories with an interesting stranger. And the tent opens up. He gets inside, and it's revealed to be the guy from before. It's Do. So these two actually don't really like each other all that much. And Kavik is like, we really need to update those codes. This is where Do is like, we've got people stationed for years without contact. We can't change them that much. Otherwise, like, they'll be left completely out with no support. Speaking to kind of part of the problem of the situation. So Kavik gives the report. Do's reaction is like, this is what happens when we let children sit at the big table. We've heard stuff like this before, of course, from a Unarak. So it just speaks to the idea of like, Kavik is like, we need to work together to prevent like the world leaders from basically getting themselves killed at Taku. But Do is like, actually no, I think we just need to let this go on and see what happens, because rather than protecting the world leaders in the next couple of days, they kind of view it as like, no, even if we have to sacrifice the current world leaders, we need to be more aware of what's going on with the combustion benders and take control of them. And it's worth the sacrifice that we get control of them, even if it means we lose some world leaders. Because the White Lotus is so big picture thinking. They're like, yeah, we can deal with the kind of introduction of like multiple world leaders, even though it would be this like world level tragedy to lose like 3 world leaders in one go. They think that is less of a threat than just gaining control of unanimity. So it really speaks to like, that is the exact opposite of Yangchen's approach. She would never agree to that. And I think it's pretty clear that Kavik also finds this like crazy, that this is the White Lotus's approach to this situation, to effectively just be like, if we need to let them die, it's fine. And he kind of does note that like, wait, you're spying on your ally. Yeah, he notes like, yeah, like it's backwards to do the spying in that way. Their counter response is that like, we don't have a plant within our enemy, but we do within the Avatar. And they just kind of leave him with the idea of just like, just do what you need to do. Just don't your own opinion doesn't matter. Just do what the Order of White Lotus tell you. And Kavik realizes that, like, oh, this is exactly the way things are with Kalyan. This is kind of what happened in the first book. It's when he met Kalyan again, this was what Kalyan wanted. Do what I say, don't care what you think, and it's exactly the same with the White Lotus. And it's, again, setting up the idea of they're only focused on unanimity, that's the information they want, that's Yangchen's secret, and even now that things have changed quite a bit with the overall situation, this is what he actually wants out of it. So very interesting kind of turn of events here. Really makes you dislike the White Lotus in this era, I think is definitely a takeaway here. That I think it's very hard to agree with their view on things overall. But what are your thoughts on this sequence?
Yeah, it definitely doesn't make you feel like you have any sort of endearment towards the White Lotus and sort of their views or their stance on sort of the world, sort of events going on, right? Like, I think probably from all the times that we've seen them so far, it feels like the Avatar series has been like the best sort of, reflection on the White Lotus. And that might be just because we only got to see them on sort of like a surface level, and we got to see them sort of help save the day and all that sort of resolution. But here we're really sort of getting to understand, how they view the world and how they view their role in the world and how they sort of want to lead things towards a better result. And I don't know if I necessarily, agree with them that if they had unanimity, the combustion benders or, Bender at this point, would that really lead them towards being able to hold the best sort of stance? Because, I mean, then they would essentially have to, use it essentially, right? Or some way, or maybe their whole plan is just to sort of, off the last, combustion bender, and then they just don't have to deal with it in the world. I don't know. That might be the sort of easiest, simple situation. And, it doesn't seem like the White Lotus would have, as much qualms doing that as opposed to Yang Chen and her, sort of decision of actually, sort of valuing human life here. But yeah, definitely, doesn't put them in the right light. And Kavik is, just another situation where, he thought maybe he might have some control in his life and what he was doing, but he pretty much realizes that he, and I think he even knew this before, but even now it's just even more sort of dire because he did come to them with like another option from the Avatar, right? So like, who else would have, a good idea on how to deal with things other than the Avatar? But here, you can see the White Lotus, really doesn't really think much of the Avatar and what they have to say. They have their own sort of ideas, their own sort of views, their own sort of big picture of things, and that's what they're trying to come to a resolute sort of ending of. And that's, I don't know, their big picture doesn't really include the general, I guess sort of perfect well-being of the world at large. Like, they say that they will work from the behind the scenes to sort of piece together the sort of nations, but if there's, I don't know, it feels like if there's such irreparable sort of damage that causes by the sort of three leaders being sort of killed in one fell swoop, I mean, I don't know, can they sort of resolve things as well as they sort of think they can? I mean, I guess we have sort of seen how they can sort of attempt to help, in the White Lotus and other eras, and especially when they become more sort of public. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like this era of White Lotus really wants to come out into the public at all in order to actually sort of like have a direct sort of means of, leading things towards the better path. So I don't know. I wonder. I don't know if either method that they take is better, but it definitely seems like here they're going for a specific way that doesn't necessarily have everything in the right sort of frame of mind.
Yeah, and then it's just the kind of sense of like arrogance as well of the situation where like they think Yang Chen is like terrible in everything that she has done. She's making all the wrong choices, but it's like, who caused the Platinum Affair? What we've been told recently is that it's the Order of the White Lotus, and it's like they're the ones who should have control of unanimity after like they caused so much of this to actually happen in the first place. Like, what are we actually talking about here? And it gets into the idea of just like they have this very strict view on things, and you can sort of see, I guess, as the eras go on, is that I'm guessing they back off a little bit. They don't choose to be as directly meddlesome, I suppose, as they are in this era as we go forward. Because like in the Kyoshi era, we didn't get too much, but like it's like, okay, we have Jinpa here. He's kind of, I suppose, quote unquote, reporting to them on Kyoshi and what she's doing, but it doesn't seem like that they were trying to like manipulate her that much. It was just like, here's some assistance for you. And obviously in the ATLA era, it seems like a little bit better, but you kind of still have the question of like, they still waited for a very specific moment before like doing anything to kind of change things. But you know, you have those kind of back and forths as well. But yeah, that is where we are going to wrap up the discussion of the book for this podcast. We'll be back in the next podcast with the kind of middle third of the book, and then the podcast after that we'll finish off with the final third of the book. Yeah, I think that's a pretty nice kind of place to leave it. It's like the inciting incident of the book here. Now we're going to build up to the whole Taku situation in the middle, what's going on there, and then we'll get our kind of finale. But so that's basically been it for episode 262 of the Avatar Online podcast. It's been myself and Greg. Thanks for listening, and bye.